And we're in. Oden, how you doing this morning?
Good, man. How are you?
Not too bad. Yeah, it's Monday, It's typical Monday, up early, trying to get some shit done before I have an amazing guest swing by the studio.
Appreciate you having me. Know why I'm here.
You don't know?
No, we'll start with that. Let's just I like this process of just being raw. So you found me, but I watched your show and I'm like, I love what this guy's doing. And for anyone who doesn't know who you are at this point after like 100 episodes, like this guy's amazing. Like I want to interview you. So maybe we'll switch this up today.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine. So I found you we've been connected on LinkedIn for quite a while,
really?
and
people use that.
So more people than you think. But what I've done is like because I moved to LA just a couple months ago, like in November, and I had been coming to LA for like 15 years because I've been making TV shows and stuff like that for so long, and so I went through everyone I knew in LA, and I was like, what do you do? Like, are you still doing the same things before COVID as after, right? Because everyone shifted.
They did. There was like monumental shifts. People became like bakers and dog walkers for 100 dogs. I don't know. People just changed their lives. It was like, and people just left.
Yeah, I mean, I would take up the UPS delivery man option for $175K a year. That sounds like good fun. be the UPS, the version of
I'm not as tall as you are.
The version of Newman from Seinfeld. But yeah, so I just went through that whole list of like everyone I knew like in 2019, and then I just started reaching out to people, and then other people introduced me to other people, and then I started cold calling others, but just anyone producing, making any content, like storytelling, music, art, just people who are fucking doing something passionate. Yeah.
Well, here we are. What do you want to ask me? I mean, I have a lot. Like, I look at your profile and I'm like, wow, this guy is this. You're this adventure guy. You've gone out and you kind of, you've seized all those opportunities that people kind of dream about, and you've gone to the middle of nowhere, and you've done a lot of stuff with your brother, right?
At the beginning, yeah, I did a few things with my brother, but he decided to have like a normal life.
Okay, so you fired him.
He quit.
Okay, gotcha. It's okay. Right, I got brothers too.
Yeah,
we go through that. But I think sometimes people like myself look at you, and you're this sort of this icon of adventure, and then there's this whole society of let's say social media, right, where it's not real. In a certain way. And I really looked at your stuff and I'm like, wow, this guy is really, he's gone out and done those adventures. And that's fascinating to sit with someone, because it's that threshold between who does something and who does not.
Who does not. Or who
does not.
Or who overproduces and who underproduces.
Maybe who's like wealthy and who can do this. But I look at your adventures and I'm like, well, those don't seem like there's any money on that one. That just seems like a lot of pain.
Actually, I'll be honest with you. It was always quite painful.
Yeah.
But we were always able to make, some money from the TV shows. And then, of course, it elevates your status, and then you get a chance to do speaking events. And there's other ways of cashing in on that kind of persona that you've created instead of just making the TV. And the way I make the TV is that I fundraise and things like that so that I own the content myself. And then I license it out for 1 to 3 years to the partners. And I have an agent who helps me do that. So at the end of the day, I produce, direct, and host my own shows. No one tells me where to go or what to do. And then if you like it, you like it. And there's the agent, you can buy it. And then I try to land at least one streaming partner so that I can fundraise off the back of that one audience.
And I hope people just heard what you said. Well, no, I feel like people make these commitments, but they're usually for a very short amount of time. It's like this dream they wake up with on a Monday morning, like here, and they talk about it, but the follow through is tremendous. It's a commitment to be able to say, okay, this is what I want for my lifestyle. And I'm sure I can only imagine there's major sacrifice. I mean, I can talk about my own life in terms of the sacrifice you have to have, and the people that I sort of look at and maybe model myself or attempt to model myself after. So it's interesting to sit here with you and say, okay, well, I see there's there's parallels in what we have to do. Might not have the miles, amount of miles that you have. You have insane miles. Yeah.
Insane.
You got good boots. I can tell.
Miles. I think if you really want to like get out and if you want to live differently, I really think you need to do that at the youngest age possible. So for me, you know, I grew up kind of middle class in Toronto, Canada. Father had a good job, mother had a good job. They eventually split, but you know, food and paying the rent and everything was never really an issue. And then, but I was in sports. So I was my dad was an Olympic athlete. So he got me into sports at a very young age. And I was just a sports person from the age of 5 to the age of 22. And I rode that through a basketball career, which took me all the way through the collegiate level. But then it's funny, like once you hit 22 and you hit your 4th year of college and you're a senior and you're not like the best player in the league or in the entire country or something like that, you don't get to play again. Like you don't get to go pro or anything. So, and then it's like, well, what do you do with your life? And the problem with being a
coach?
Yeah, you could coach. You know, it was good. I had to work every summer when I was in university, similar to lots of people out there. And those dipping the toe into the employment market led me to believe that I didn't want to stay in Canada and I didn't want to follow in the footsteps of those people I was working around. Super nice people, super sweet, you know, they would take a bullet for you, but that lifestyle of just going to work every day and stuff like that didn't interest me at all. So I was like, I really need to like break this cycle. So when I was 22 and I graduated, I moved to China. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but China is different enough and hard enough of a transition to make that whatever happens to me will be completely different than what would have happened to me if I stayed in Toronto. And that's what I did.
So how long were you in China for?
18 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I started off as an English teacher and I did that so that I could pay my rent. But I started doing writing and photography because China opened up this like whole other passion inside me. Like I had no idea I loved writing and photography because I was training 6 hours a day. Like you don't like anything other than eating and sleeping if you're training 6 hours.
Yeah.
So then I got to China, I started loving writing and photography, and then I started teaching English so that I could take these trips into the countryside, and I was going into Tibet and visiting all these villages and shooting it and writing up little stories, and then I was working for local magazines in China. They have like English language expat magazines. And then I was doing stuff in Hong Kong and Singapore, and then airline magazines, and then eventually I got in with like Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, New York Times, Condé Nast. Yeah, I mean, it just took a long time.
It only took 18 years. That's just amazing.
But
most people cry after like 6 weeks. They're like, my little adventure didn't work out. No one's watching me. But I think to commit for 18 years, I mean, it's sitting across from you. I had my first entertainment job when this is the transition here where we talk about me because no one caught that.
No one caught
Yeah, no one saw that.
Yeah.
Right? Turn it back.
Switching this over.
Yeah, here we go. But I can relate to that. Like I look at the commitment from a relatively young age, and I think 16, 17, I started in radio. And I started in broadcast, and I started to realize the importance of storytelling with voice. And I don't have a naturally gifted speaking voice other than maybe the art of the gab and avoiding dead air. And I learned really what storytelling was through audio and how that can affect us, and just conversation and how important that is in the human spirit. And what is it going to take when you're working at a radio station? I think it was like $7.50 an hour. Ouch. Yeah, before the turn of the century. Let's age here a little bit.
Yeah.
What is it going to take to stay in this? And I realize you see some of the older folks that were at the radio station. Some of them had, no, they won't know me at this point, so I can tell these stories.
Drop some names, baby.
I mean, they had the ankle bracelets, for DUIs, and I would take them to the shows, and I was 17, and I would drive them, and I saw the writing on the wall, and I'm like, well, do I want to become that? Like, there's an art form to becoming an aging DJ, and it's fun if you love music and you love the kind of energy of the audience participation. But is there more on this road, and what's the bigger story? And so when I hear you talk about those 18 years, like you're packing your bag for a much longer journey. It's a much greater commitment. And you don't always see what that's going to be.
You never do.
No, you don't. You just have to know that eventually you will land somewhere. And that's a really scary part of this process. And that's in filmmaking, that's in broadcast, that's in TV, that's in theater, that's musicians, giggers and all that stuff. Like, what is this going to be? What is this going to be when I'm 50?
You have to be super comfortable rolling the dice and not knowing. And I think that's maybe a metaphor for everything I've done. Like I moved to China when I was 22. I had no idea what I was going to get up to. But then after 2 or 3 years, I got in with the Western media magazines, and then that led me to a career in journalism until around 2010 when print died. And then I moved into television, and I just felt like whatever I did, I'd figure it out and I'd make it work, because I moved to China when I was 22. I didn't know anyone, didn't speak Chinese, had like $1,500 in my bank account. Like I was just like,
I still have $1,500 in my bank account.
But no,
I say that because there's reasons for that. We'll get into that later. Give it like skip forward to a half hour.
If you want to know, just fast forward to 45 minutes to why Oden only has
None of this is
real. Only has $1,500 in his bank.
It's all rented.
But yeah, so then it's just like a confidence thing, and it's just like, okay, I'll be okay. Same with moving to LA, actually, just a couple months ago. It's just like, well, now I'm going to take everything I've done in my life and move it here. And this podcast has been amazing because, number one, I want to have face-to-face conversations with amazing, talented people like yourself, but I also want the audience to just learn about people without an agenda, like just two people face-to-face in a room, going deep, having like really interesting, open conversations without trying to posture or pretend.
I think so. And so when you are driving to this and you're like, okay, I'm sitting in front of Ryan today, what are we going to talk about? What am I going to do? I think that's a big part of it, because I feel like the honest showcasing of who you are is still, we're still sort of at that time where we don't quite want to identify with who our true selves are.
Perhaps.
Right?
Yeah.
And we don't want to show people our true selves. And so on my way here today, I was like, maybe I can just, where do I learn in this experience?
You should play the tech billionaire. You just come back from Sun Valley or Jackson Hole.
No, I think sometimes people who can say that can afford to say that. Okay. I can't afford to say that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who, I don't know if we call them false prophets or people in front of us giving us sound advice that sound like experts, but we do. And I think this sort of podcast is really important because we can just say, okay, these are my experiences, take them or leave it. It's not for everybody.
That's the truth.
It's a long journey. I'm talking about 25, 30 years to this point. And I feel like I'm just getting recognition by myself, like to myself, where I'm like, okay, cool. You're going to make it now. You're going to be okay. And you've got that voice in your head. You should have that voice. That voice should always exist that says, the hell is right.
I think that keeps you hungry, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's what gets you up in the morning. Like if you don't think that someone's coming to hunt you down from behind, then you're not going to run fast.
That's like, what is that, old school Toronto military? Like,
it's a bit of basketball too. Like I played basketball, like if you're the starting point guard, there's always going to be a backup point guard that wants your job.
Yeah.
If you're a senior and there's a hot freshman who's just come in, like you're going to have to fucking put them in their place to make sure that you're still the man on the team, right? Like this is a common kind of thing. Like I've when I was young, I wanted to try to do better work than other photographers that worked at the New York Times, for example. And a lot of them were coming to China to do work, and I wanted to be the China guy. So I had to try to do better work or try to do more insightful work or try to find, better ways of making my visuals stand out, right? Or the stories that I was covering stand out. So that competition, I think, is super healthy, and it keeps, as long as it doesn't get negative and as long as it doesn't turn you inside out.
I think so. I mean, my experiences are bizarre sometimes.
Oh, please, God, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
When I think of it, so let's go back a little bit in terms of, so I started in radio, still in high school,
Mhm.
And
Which city are we in here?
we're in Santa Barbara County, so north of LA. So Arbitron rated #1 station. I walk in. I say I want to be an intern. I have no idea what that means, right? So they put me in the ad like space. They're like, okay, so what does that mean? You're going to work in ads. That means getting in cold calling, going through the yellow pages. So I would call these places from like barbershops, and I would have to think about how they're going to buy airtime.
Just for everyone out there who is young, Yellow Pages was a book about that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
Pages before there was Google. You couldn't just Google things. You actually had to find them in the book and picked up the phone and call them.
Right next to the Thomas Guide. Another example, people are now searching. Just Google Thomas Guide. It's like Battleship
Yeah.
for getting places.
Yeah. We're getting a history lesson here.
Yeah, age lesson too.
Mm.
So I came up with this strategy. I'm like, how am I going to get into the booth? You know, how am I going to get into the studio?
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing advertisements based on the cold calls. So I think the first one was like a barber shop.
Like you were writing jingles, like advertisements.
Sort of writing jingles, but I had no musical background. I loved, at that point in my life, I really loved music. I was the only one in my family who didn't play an instrument. It's a tragedy, because now I'm finally getting back to that point where I'm the only one who has any interest in pursuing music.
Mm.
And I would write these character voices, just ridiculous character voices that could only be done by a certain character performer. And that was me. And so I would go into the booth and I would record it. And that's what got me in, is just that, like, taking a risk. And then I would sell airtime, and then I would do it over and over again until I became a board operator. And then eventually they're like, oh, you can be the remote DJ when we're out on remote things. And then it became, I was a producer of a show, and then I would interview, I was really young, I think I was 18, like interviewing No Doubt and Green Day.
Oh, nice.
For this show called Homegrown, about California artists. This is really fun. And I like the interactions of seeing, I liked it so much less for the presence or the celebrity of it. I liked it as a case study. To be like, what makes people different? How do people arrive at success? What's the dedication of it? What's the persistent attitude? And then behind the scenes, of course, I was a failed high school student.
Yeah.
It never turned into a lick of homework.
No.
My entire life.
It just didn't turn you on, though.
And I was like, okay, $7.50 an hour, DJ with a little, what do you call it, ankle bracelet monitor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is not a great future. So went back to City College, dedicated myself, wound up getting I think a 4.2, which seems ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a way to do that or leverage that back in the day to get higher than a 4.0. And then got into Harvard and NYU. And
wow.
I decided to go to NYU Film School. And my parents were, before that, I was actually going to be a sharpshooter in the military. I was recruited, and I bailed on that.
Really?
Good choice, I think. But I wound up going to NYU, and my parents were very supportive of that, because my dad's like, well, you get into school, pay for it.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, this is like going to the track. This kid's gonna lose. There's no way. And I wound up getting into the schools. I chose NYU, and I went to the film program there. And it's different than what it is now, right? We didn't have the TikToks. We didn't have the Instagram. We didn't really know what content was. We knew what film and storytelling was.
Mm-hmm. This was what, the 90s?
Let's just say that for the sake of the story.
Come on, we're almost the same. We're probably the same age. We both got enough gray in our beard these days.
This isn't great. This is experience.
The salt and pepper.
Apparently people like that. I don't know who, but if you're out there.
There's a whole, yeah, it can be pretty popular. But, okay, so you're radio DJing at 17, 18. Did Good Morning Vietnam and Robin Williams play any role in you wanting that job?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I think everybody has like a radio voice. Good morning. Yeah, this thing where you really need to be more exciting than maybe you are, or how you go into the studio.
Caffeinated.
Yeah, you need to, because you're trying to reach people. So I learned something about messaging and storytelling in terms of what that genre was. And then as I was at City College, because I didn't go to City College in Santa Barbara, I went up to San Francisco for 2 years. This is before tech. There was like a Yahoo taxi cab where you could exchange emails. And that was like the big tech push when I was there.
Amazing.
And Craigslist was across the street from where I lived. It was like a little sign and a guy, and you're like, oh, this is just this nerdy guy in here. This is never going to take off. It's all these strange things. And what I was in this environment of San Francisco at that point was a very artistic town. I
remember it.
And poetry, and there was a lot going on. Very different from what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And there was still this sort of this move for independent films. So we were shooting on Super 8, cutting and splicing a night and making movies. And then I was also working in broadcast television, where I made my move over to there doing promos for like the Oakland A's and the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember lines on camera.
Uh-oh.
Like, I just like freeze up. So I'm like, this isn't for me. Yeah, this is not going to work. And then I was getting good grades, and I going to New York. And when I was in NYU, I really started focusing in on cinematography. And I was doing really well in all my other classes, writing and direction. And cinematography I was really fascinated with, because the visual medium is, as we know, is just so incredibly powerful immediately. And then writing can really emphasize that, especially in the context of film.
Mm-hmm.
And I failed my cinematography course.
Because you loved it too much?
No, because it had math in it.
Oh, shit, yeah.
And it was like, I don't understand the math part of it at all. So I would take this class, and I failed. And then I think I shot about maybe 35, 40 films after that, like $2.5 million worth of production through NYU. There's some kids with money, so you got these $250,000 short films. And I just really never looked back. I moved out to LA, had an agent, lovely agents. Trying to think where those places even exist. Paradigm, I'm sure still exists.
Yeah, I think so.
If you still exist.
Paradigm sounds familiar.
Yeah. And had some lovely support there. And then realized one day what the difference between business and art is.
God, it's such a big gap, isn't it?
And that hurt really bad. So I had a girlfriend at the time who was very successful actress, was working a lot, who really knew how to navigate this. And I learned a lot from her in terms of art and commerce. But I still didn't learn. And it took me a long time. I still, even think today, I'm still learning the art or the throes of art and commerce on where your heart is versus where your wallet is, and how those things can come together.
It's really just the art of compromise.
I think it's the art of compromise in some ways. And I think most people will look at compromise and say, what is compromise? Because we hear that in the relationship context, right? And compromise, to me, is meeting. It's always going to be meeting in the middle. We're all coming from somewhere different. You have to meet in the middle. If you go one side too far, you've lost yourself. If you make people come to you, you're maybe too egotistical, or you can't detach from who you are.
Can you give this talk exactly the way you did it in Congress today? Like tomorrow, can we get to DC as quickly as possible?
We're going to talk about gun rights. We're going to talk about...
We don't have to talk about that.
The weekend. First moment of registered independence. I'm just as Canadian as you are.
I can't vote. I'm not allowed to vote. Exactly. If I was an illegal immigrant from Mexico, I think I could vote.
Maybe. You could. Maybe, actually. You could. Yeah. I would like you to vote. It feels like you'd be a good voter.
There's only two choices. I've always been so confused by the American system. Like, you go to Europe and you've got like 6 or 7 different political parties. You can like really find something that you like, or find someone that champions your vision of who you think you are or who you want to be. Here it's just a coin. There's too much money in it. Like,
it's parliamentary up in Canada, or no?
Parliamentary, yeah.
Okay.
So
it's amazing that I know that, because I did my research on the way here. I was like, he's going to ask me. We're going to get into politics, and I'm going to have to be
I've never felt comfortable though voting because it's so there's too much money in it and it just feels so sickening. I think and again too in the United States, the popular vote doesn't even matter, right? It's really the Electoral College that does the vote. So the Electoral College might take some direction based on the popular vote, but at the end of the day, it's the Electoral College votes that matter. And most people in the United States don't even know that. They think like when they go to the ballot poll, they're actually voting for the president of the United States, but they're not. It's the Electoral College, and I mean, I have the burden of studying American history and American politics in university, of international politics degree, but I definitely took a lot about the U.S. and it's just amazing how like Americans don't know anything about Canada, but they also know almost nothing.
They around there during a war. That's about all right now.
Taylor Swift is apparently moving there in November.
Good for her.
But yeah, okay. I need to unpack some of this with you because you blew through a ton of stuff there.
Blew through some stuff. We kind of left. We left at, so I moved to New York.
No, I want to go back to San Francisco.
Oh, you want to go back to San Francisco?
I love San Francisco because in the 90s, before the tech boom, you're right. It was all about peace and love and music and art. And people don't get that. Yeah.
It really was.
It's totally changed now. It's all about just money in Silicon Valley and no one can afford to live there except the homeless.
Yeah. That's true. And that's a major, I refer to that current issue. I just had this the other day and I feel like there's a big sensitivity around that particular thing. Some people call it a problem. Other people call it a massive dilemma. Some people politicize it. And I think what it is when I look at what San Francisco goes through, I think it's an incredible incubator for ideas, and it always has been. So whether it's tech now, or it's they have a crisis on their hands, and I'm not here to solve that, but I do think that California often is a crisis management state. We take on issues before most states do, while the other ones are like, what the hell's going on with Newsom? When I travel, people always ask me what's going on with Newsom. I'm like, I don't know the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you in California, we're trying to look forward and see how to solve these problems. So when they're on your doorsteps, and maybe they won't be because we have nice weather here.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. So we're a political refugee state, and that can be that someone's coming from Indiana and they're homeless. They're going to wind up in California because the weather's good here. So we are sort of a refugee. People take refuge here, and we take
here.
Yeah, and so you're here. And we have to take responsibility for that sometimes. And so that puts the spotlight on us. And so apparently every Californian is being a political expert.
I don't watch the news.
I don't think I watched the news as much as I did this weekend. And we can ignore that if we want. But I think we have to face these issues together. And over the last couple of years, I have worked. This is interesting, because I'm a narrative guy. We're going all over the place here.
Mm-hmm.
But I have worked behind the scenes for certain lobbyists on both sides.
Interesting.
In terms of messaging. And that has really made me a more centrist person. And also more sympathetic to both sides. That people have needs and desires, and everybody has their own particular lifestyle that they want to support. And I think before that, I was more one-way leaning. You can look at my past posts and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I like being in the middle of things. I feel it's my responsibility as a filmmaker to sit in the middle and let people decide. So I work in documentaries. I do narrative stuff. Done tons of advertising as well, which is no political affiliation. It's just buy. And that's been a tremendous journey. But the things where you really learn is when you do sit and you listen to people like politicians, or you're working with documentaries that are about political subjects, or you're on films that have voices. And I really try and work on films that are trying to say something. It doesn't matter how big a budget it is. It just has to be something. It has to make us think. We can't sit and not think anymore. It's insulting to the audience.
I was
go on about this.
Yeah. I was
insults our audience anymore.
I was doing an interview in 2019, and this was at like the height of my career because I've taken a bit of a hit since COVID. But in 20,
man, like you lost like half your followers.
No, the followers. I don't. it's hard to monetize your followers if you don't have millions. But so in 2019, I did 10 episodes of adventure content. So I did 10 expeditions in 10 different countries in 10 months.
Wow.
2 weeks on, 2 weeks off.
Intense on the body.
And then I did 42 speaking engagements around that all over the world.
Wow.
So I was rocking and rolling. And I remember I was doing a bunch of interviews, I think, for Extreme Treks or something like that, which is another TV show I make for BBC. And someone was asking me, like, what kind of content do you really want to make for people? And I was like, I just want to make people less stupid, because I really feel like everything on TV makes you dumb.
But a big aha moment for me.
Yeah. But I'm just like, if I can go to a country and walk across some trek or trail or climb a mountain where I'm engaging with local people, learning about local customs, learning about the worries and the needs of these people, and then also have an amazing experience in that country. Plus we showcase the country a little bit. And then plus I'm as honest as I possibly can with the audience about how I'm feeling, what I'm learning. Then if you watch that, you will have learned something, and maybe you can go there and do the trip I did or do some variation of it, but just not, but you have to think about it. Like after you're done watching the episode, you got to just think about it. And there's just too much garbage out there making us all retarded. I mean, sorry to use the R word, that happens, but like, I'm serious. Special needs. Did you ever hear the thing about
Gen X? I'm imagining. So that was common street. We're always going to learn about our mess. There's always going to be a generation that's offended by one thing or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we should always So I hear that and I'm like, where? What he's saying? But I don't think we have to be that way. You know, I can scold you. There's a kitchen back here. I can talk to you about that later.
Did you ever see Robert Downey Jr. on Rogan? He was saying how he didn't get in trouble for playing blackface on Tropic Thunder because all of the heat went on to Ben Stiller because of Simple Jack, because they used the R word, because he calls him.
Yeah.
He's like, somehow the entire world ignored that I was playing blackface, and they just put all the negative attention on Simple Jack.
And you as a Canadian must look at Americans and be like, where's our maturity and understanding on certain things? What's parity?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What
the anger?
There is a lot of anger. There really is. We want to constantly teach each other lessons,
mm-hmm.
or maybe what it is we don't have the confidence to just feel good about ourselves anymore.
That's top down, and that is purposely driven into you guys by the media and the I could go deep on this stuff. Like,
let's do it. I'm fine. I mean, as men, we're not supposed to feel good. Women aren't supposed to feel good. I think we're at a cusp where we just need to step back and we need to say, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Take a deep breath. Do some box breathing. 5 in, 5 out. And relax a little bit. Get rid of your anxiety. Get rid of your anger.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone in this country is living on the edge. So like, you have to admit, okay, so I spent 18 years living in Shanghai, and the country just went like this for 18 years. And everyone around me was getting wealthier and quote unquote happier, right? Whether that's true or not, who knows? But you next year someone has a Tesla. 2 years later, someone has a Porsche. 3 years later, they move out of the city into the country. They buy a bigger home. Kids are going to school in the U.S., right? Like that was Shanghai was so unbelievably positive because the economy was going crazy. Everyone was doing well. But then you come here, you have this massive amount of wealth, which is just held by the top. Everyone else is in incredible debt. Like even from the age of 18, these people are still in their 40s carrying college debt. And then they've got housing debt. And then they've got kids. And the pressure.
And then you have divorce debt.
And then you have divorce debt. Wherever we head. But it's unbelievable. And then all that pressure just is on you. And then you start seeing red and blue and left and right. And then someone says something stupid on Twitter, and that's just you or X, and you just explode on them.
I think so. I think it's the psychosis of where we're at in our maturity as people and our nation that kind of, it allows us to be immature, instead of being connected. There's no form of connectivity. Like it's not promoted to be connected. I have 2 children. I have a daughter who's 3 and a son who's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm with them, I'm divorced. When I have that time and I invest that time into them, like I'll see them later this afternoon for a couple of hours, do a quick drop off, and then I have them for 3 days in a row. But that's a keen reminder for me what's important at the end of the day.
Very
And
true.
I think about my own childhood and how my parents were able to, put me in the nest, allow me to be who I want to be. My parents they're not wealthy people. They had to work really hard. I spend a lot of time talking to them now on the back half of life about what it took to get there, especially as a single dad. And I say, wow, you guys got to do this together. You're so lucky. Unfortunately, that's not going to be my story. My story is going to be a little bit different. And I think often when we tell these stories, I'm very apprehensive about telling this, like in a sense that people tell this story about the strength and the dignity of, being a single father and a single mother. It's a tough journey, but it's a journey to me in which I get to learn a lesson that I wouldn't had if I was married.
Yeah, fair.
Right? And this will shape me in a way and shape my children. And you don't get to have, sometimes as a parent, you don't get to have a bad day. So when you think about people who have a voice and they're complaining on Twitter and they're angry, you're like, wow, no, I can't do that for 5 minutes. Or I've got my son over here who needs me a lot more than that. And so we get into the realm of personal responsibility. What is our stoicism in all of this? Who are we going to be for other people? And trust me, man, I mean, I'm out in the world, as a single guy and, going through the throes of like, what's a relationship now that, coming out of a 10-year relationship, married for 2.5 and figuring out what this all means and what that means to even be in this world in terms of that. But on the other half is also where my responsibility is to my kids, where my responsibility is to myself as a creative person. And you go through these throes, where you wind up? You just wind up where you were at 5.
Really?
You are just who you are. And you don't ever have to defend that.
Interesting.
You just be.
As long as you don't rub people the wrong way.
Should I leave?
No, not at all. It's funny though, being a single dad, so I'm divorced as well. I was married for about 10 years. But I can tell you one of these things. So my parents were together from when I was born, I guess, till when I was 8, and my brother was 5. And it's funny, like when my parents were together, I think my dad really struggled being a father because he was commuting to the city. He had a big job. He was going early in the morning to work out. He was coming back late because he would have to entertain clients and stuff like that. And then on the weekends, he was also training for triathlons, and he just needed to like catch up and rest after a tough day of supporting the whole family, right? And then when my parents got divorced, my dad was able to then really control his schedule much better. And then when we would see him on the weekends, we would only see him on the weekends. He was fully present after the divorce. So I think I've talked to him about this a little bit, but he might be watching. But he became such a more present father after the divorce than while my parents were married. And I don't think enough people talk about that. I actually think a lot of parents can become much better parents, co-parenting or being a single parent, because there's not this like divisiveness between roles. Like you just have to do everything. And then once you accept that and make that switch in your head, you just fucking do it. Or it's just like, I don't have a partner to pick up the slack. I need to be present. And
you do. It's, whether you want to call it codependency or you want to play, I do second fiddle in the relationship, there's always going to be someone, like when I think about my relationship, and I'm cautious to talk about it because I think a lot of people, it's very easy to go down the dark road of what's wrong with a relationship. I think you have to internalize, and you're catching me at a good time.
That's great.
An interesting time of my life.
Reflective.
I think you have to be reflective, but you have to continue to move forward, because when you have little kids, you just got to go forward. You got to see it through for them. But I do think it sounds like your father, and maybe we can talk about men because we're men here. And this is probably a female issue too, is finding your place in a relationship. And I will say this again and again. You've got to meet in the middle. You do. you have to see and respect the other person on the other side. And my mother said something to me last night. She said, we had this rule in marriage. I'm like, oh, wow, we're at this part of life. We're going to tell me all the things that I don't really want to hear. Okay, we're not ready to hear. Like my grandmother, when she was 95, going to my parents' room, she'd never seen it. She's like, oh, this is a nice little playpen. Okay. Wow, so I'm not at that point in my parents. They're still here mentally. She said something to me that was interesting. She said, we had this rule. She's probably going to kill me for saying this today. She's like, I didn't mean for you to put this out there. When one of us was going crazy, the other person could not.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Okay. The other person had to just stand tall, because we knew what that other person, my mom and dad knew each other since they were 16. So they knew what the best side of that person was. And they understood that it wasn't always going to be the best side.
It's impossible to be your best every day.
It's impossible. But that meeting, I thought that was a very interesting way of meeting in the middle, because most people will retreat when someone's having a hard time. It's a natural aversion to be like, I'm having a positive day. Ooh, I can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm on, I'm flying high. And it's also on the other side too. When you're having a hard day, right? You want to pull more people in because you need help, or you want to ostracize. And so I think this philosophy is also something that I carry beyond my interpersonal relationships, but I carried into my work too, that you can't work in this business of creativity without knowing who your partner is.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, I work with directors. I work with myself.
Who changes on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. It's a chameleon. And it also depends on what sort of subject matter you're working on. So documentary or fiction, like, it's going to affect you in a different way. Mm-hmm. Documentary really need to get your message out. It's usually timely. Fiction, it's about really harvesting a good idea, developing it. Just could talk about development. Nobody wants to develop anything. They just want to shoot.
Yeah, of course.
Your first draft of the script. Let's do this. They don't want to talk about it.
It's a point and shoot culture.
Yeah. And so that relationship philosophy goes deep into that as well. Like with directors I work with, and I do, I'm working with younger directors now, and they're awesome. Like, they're inspiring to me, and I hope that I'm inspiring to them. They don't just look at me as like the guy behind the desk that says no
all the time. Right.
No, not all the time. I'm relatively. I think I'm very. I like the joy of collaborating with people. I do. It brings, whether that's an actor, or if that's a writer or a director, or another producer, or cinematographer, or an art director, if we have the money. Mm-hmm. But this philosophy of filmmaking, man, I don't know where it's going to go. Where are we? Mm-hmm. My prediction is I'm going to keep working. Most of my friends are afraid that it's over.
Really? Yeah. COVID and the actor strike and the writer strike has really put a sour patch into LA these days, or what?
I don't believe in stopping.
You can't stop.
I think most people operate from a place of fear.
Everyone does, almost.
And so I think you have to tell yourself, okay, just stop, cope with what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. Go do 20 push-ups. Breathe for a second. Go for a walk. Don't respond to that text message. Oh man, I could write a book about me responding to text messages and just being an idiot.
I think we've all been there at some stage. Yeah.
Don't let your emotions take over your best judgment. That's hard to do. We're emotional beasts.
Mm-hmm. I've always found that spending lots of time in nature and being disconnected was super helpful. So like in my early days when I lived in Shanghai, it was a city of like 30 million people. Yeah. And I would get a lot of stress and anxiety about living in the city, working in the city, relationships in the city. And then every time I had some time off, I would go out into the mountains. So Western China is empty and it's all just mountains and a few deserts and stuff like that. But Tibet's out there and things. And yeah, you go out there, you turn off the phone, you go hiking for like 2 weeks. You find a guy who has a couple donkeys and his wife can cook. You buy some food, and then he takes you on the trail. He's done it 100 times since he was like 5 years old. You go out and you just live in a tent for like 10 days. And I tell you, nothing better than just living with the natural rhythm of the earth.
I can relate to that. So a couple of months ago, yeah, I was in Patagonia, and I just packed it up. My friends were like, "Your pack's too heavy." Of course it was. Okay. Of course it was. But I brought everything with me, being that I had no idea what was in Patagonia. I brought all my meals for 10 straight days.
Wow.
Everything. So I got it down to about 30 pounds, which for any hiker is going to watch and be like, that guy's ridiculous. Like, everyone knows you can resupply Patagonia, and you should get down to like 17. But I had 30 pounds, and I had trained really hard. So that 30-pound pack felt like nothing. I went down there as a solo hiker. Of course, all my friends are like, "You're going to die." So I made sure to get really bright, like on the bottom of my shoes. So if I did die, they could just find me.
That's a good way to do it.
Thaw out, and they find the orange bottom. Anything that's bright, they'll find you in the winter thaw. And you hear those stories. Like when you're down there, they're like, got sweaty on the mountain. It was cold. Sweat turns to ice. And they found a guy last year just sitting on a rock.
Mm.
And I was
Perspiration is a killer.
Yeah, it is. And so what that teaches you about is patience, one foot after another. And you know that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go too fast, you expire. And if you go too slow, you also expire because you don't make it to your next destination.
Yeah.
And so that journey for me to do it by myself, that's no new thing. I'm not the first human to do this. But I will say, in listening to what you're saying, you have to go out and do things by yourself and not post it.
Imagine that.
And that's okay. That's hard to do when you're in entertainment. You need to be, here, let's be present.
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe a promotion. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is just a conversation.
I think it's two grown men becoming friends.
Could be.
For the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get in way too fast though. So maybe a second interview.
But I just think like you said, I think if you're in entertainment, there's this pressure on you where you always have to be like aspirational. So like when people look at my Instagram, for example, they don't want to see me having a bad day. They want to see me on the top of some mountain because that's what they see on TV. So there's this whole like thing like, oh, if Ryan is just having a shit day or a shit week or a shit year, like I don't want to fucking hear about it. Like you should be riding a motorcycle across India or climbing a mountain, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, so that's the pressure we put on ourselves in this industry if you happen to be in front of the camera.
Yeah, I think, well, you're this iconoclast in some way, right?
Mm.
You're the guy that's not... You are who you are. And I think people probably look at you. Yes, when I looked at your profile, I'm like, oh, there he is. It's this guy, nonstop. But we have this other side of us. We can't constantly be that person, right? We look at elected officials, and maybe they are always that person, unfortunately. Who knows how much time they have to actually, sit back. And especially in this let's get into politics. We don't know what's happening. I'm just going to tell you from working behind the scenes a little bit and just having a tiny taste of that in the privateness of that, and not being someone who was known and working in that. We have no idea what these people go through. We don't. We hear bullet points and talking points and all that stuff, but we don't really know what's happening, and we're trying to identify. So people look at Ryan and they say, oh, Ryan, adventure bikes, mountain climber. But we don't know who Ryan is until we actually sit in front of him, like you and I are sitting right now.
Agreed.
And then we get to decide how much of Ryan we want.
Yeah.
And that's the society we live in now.
Mm-hmm.
We can just cut Ryan off. Oh, I'm only going to text with Ryan. That's my relationship with Ryan.
Mm-hmm. Or
Or I call Ryan, or I show up to Ryan's house. And so now we have all these options of how we want to compartmentalize. Let me take that line again. So now we have all these options.
Rerun that.
Yeah, let's rerun that. We have these options of compartmentalizing our life because of technology. I don't necessarily think that's the healthiest way of living. I don't think that helps in our own story of our life. And so when I think about what my next steps are, is I try and get as close to people as I possibly can now, because one, the clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm.
It's always ticking since the day you're born.
That's a lot of pressure to
So
understand.
It's a very hard concept to gather, especially because you don't know what tomorrow is.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just hear the ticking of the clock, not feel too much pressure, but get with people and understand what that means on a different thing. And I think we're a culture of discouragement to have connectivity, and I'll say that again.
Mm.
So I think I bring that to my work. And right now I'm on this whole, like, man, I have a lot of movies happening in a row.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I'm trying to create an incubator for filmmakers to go back to maybe what they were doing in the Gen X, the smaller films, bigger voices, take more risk, not capital risk, but voice risk, expression risk. And I think we don't have that enough now. We just have insults and banter and rhetoric
And Marvel,
which is great. I'm not part of that universe.
neither am I.
I mean, I'm Oden, but I'm in my own universe, and I've been that person for a long time.
But it's true what you said. Like, so I think the guy the director, I think, of America History, the movie that won an Oscar, I think, for Best Original Screenplay or something. Like, he came up and said, "Hey guys, instead of making $140 or $50 or $100 million movie, let's make 10 movies at $4 million a piece."
You're talking about Tony Kaye, maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
History X.
No. This was American History X was fucking amazing with
Ed Norton.
Ed Norton.
Yeah.
I remember Fight Club. Wasn't that good? So I saw something on Instagram. Fight Club's like 30 years old this week or this month or something.
No.
I'm so fucking old. No, but yeah, but anyway, someone at the Oscars who had won an award came out and said, "Hey, look, instead of making one movie for $50 million, we should get back to making 10 movies for $5 million and get 10 different voices out there." And this is actually a trend in Hollywood that I've suffered from, because for me, and maybe for you as well, like if you work on lower budgets or you work independently, like in 2016, 17, 18, a Discovery Channel or a History Channel or Nat Geo or something like that, like an EP would get, an executive producer would get a budget of like $10 million. And then it'd be like, okay, 10 shows for $10 million. I need 10 showrunners, 10 editors, or 10 directors. And then we got to work on talent. And then, 12 to 18 months later, you get 10 properties coming in. Those are your 10 stories to tell. But since COVID, the risk taking is totally different. So now they'll get a $10 million budget and they'll fucking call Chris Hemsworth's agent or Jason Momoa, and they'll be like, "You're the guy, we're putting it all in, let's fucking roll the dice." And I had television producers tell me that's the only way to break through the noise, is to get a fucking Marvel superhero and put 100% of your budget for the whole year on one project. And of course, then there's no money left for little players like me.
Yeah. And unfortunately, those guys are really good looking and nice.
I don't know about the nice, but yeah, they're pretty hot, right? Chris Hemsworth. What was the
third? I mean, from what I've met one of them, very nice, and it's hard to compete with someone who's just so lovely. It's like, wow, I get it. Like, this makes sense, and I understand the investment, but I think the bigger point that you're talking about, the larger point, is fear,
for sure,
of failure, and even executives. So I stay so far away from that. Everything I do is independently financed, which is difficult to do. So what it does is it stands on one thing and one thing only: the reputation that I'm going to bring something that's going to either be, maybe it's a vanity project in the sense of like, we're going to do a voice and we want to make this film and we're going to have this stand out, or that I look at it as a business and creative venture. This is creatively going to push the audiences, but it's still going to be profitable. And so, no, it's not going to be today it's not going to be a big budget project. But I think when we look at where we are right now and what's profitable and what's not, we're in a real quandary right now. People are not, the system, I don't say the system is broken. We just need to bring some of the players to the forefront And there are plenty of people who do this right. I don't talk about how the system is broken. Creativity is never broken. It just depends on how you want it to yield.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't listen to, try and not pay attention to the strike. I just think about, okay, who's not working? How can we all get together and make something? And that sounds so naive. I'm sure distributors are like, oh, this guy, right? But I've had a lot of luck with distribution. I had some really big sales. I had a nice sale with Neon. Right after Parasite won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't sit around and talk about those sorts of things. I try and just do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like laurels.
Fair enough. No,
I just like to work. I like to create. And that's the thing that I really, really, really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I love the creative process. And it gets me out of bed at 6 o'clock every morning with no alarm and puts me down at 11. And I do 7 hours and get back up and do it all over again.
And that's inspiring, man. That's great.
Hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh.
It's
I'd have said it if it wasn't.
inspiring quotes only here on the Ryan Pyle podcast. But no, it's true. Like if you work in the creative field and being creative makes you happy, then there's nothing better than just working and not having to talk about it, not having to bullshit about it, not having to get up on stage and fucking deal with people.
I think so. I mean, there's the monetary part of it. So people are like, all right, so Oden can go on your podcast and talk about all the successful creative stuff. You still have to figure out how to pay yourself in all of this, right? And I think this is the artist's dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where do we and how do we pay ourselves?
Enter OnlyFans and feet pictures.
Yes, I think so. I don't have my link. My hot link.
I read that Bella Thorne does $11 million a month
Wow.
on OnlyFans.
And I don't even know who that is.
She's a former actor. She was like in Mean Girls and stuff like that.
Okay.
But she was like a teen sex icon or like late teen,
Okay.
like 18, 19, 20. Now she's like in her 30s. She doesn't do Hollywood movies really anymore because she doesn't have to. She was like one of the first. I'm just amazed at how this it's not really even, it's just like peeking into people's lives has become so valuable monetarily in our society. Like whether you've got Patreon for artists and other people, and then you've got, OnlyFans for people in
You're
this.
missing out.
It is, but it's just
Part of it. What's behind the door? How do I get in? Exclusivity.
But the monetary value of the transactions going on there is absolutely unbelievable, and it dwarfs anything that's going on in cinema. Like,
Yeah.
think about that.
I don't. That's that.
It's
That's the
interesting.
answer. I don't think about it at all because I just try and focus on what I do in terms of what I think is meaningful to me. I think that's the bigger part of this. We chase after stuff. We're like, oh, your podcast should be this way. Ryan, why is your podcast more like this? Why isn't Ryan more like Bear Grylls? What's going on here?
I tune all that out.
Right?
Mm.
But I'm sure that these comparisons get made, or people make those comparisons about me too, like on all kinds of levels in my personal life, in my creative life. Oh, you should be more this way. People are big coaches now. They're big. And coaching is really popular.
COVID has birthed a billion self-help coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna make fun of something, and I'm like, no, you shouldn't do this.
Do it if you want.
It's the Eight Brother podcast series.
Yeah.
It's the people recovering from something
Mhm.
and then wanting to talk about it for 90 minutes.
Mhm.
And generally they're celebrities.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not going to do that with you today.
Sounds good.
Because I think it's lovely. It's important to watch someone's fall from fame,
Mhm.
and it's important. But let's be honest, like most of us are not going to be there
Or understand any of it.
or understand any of it because you're not going to have $100 million in your bank account. You're not going to have a high-profile relationship. You're not going to have all these assets, and then maybe you come from a humble beginning. It sounds like your humble beginning. If you add all this stuff into it, the results will probably be the same.
Mhm.
You're going to have a fall from grace. There's no human being in the world that can go through all the limelight, I mean, there's a few, maybe Keanu Reeves. He seems pretty cool.
Quiet.
Yeah, he's got it right. Like, if I'm going to look at one person, I'll be like, that guy's very inspirational to me.
A legend and just humble.
Yeah, like true humility,
Mm-hmm.
honest humility. So when I think we model ourselves, even if we're not quite sure who we ourselves are, Keanu Reeves is a good one.
I love that.
It really is.
I love that there's like 50,000 artists on IMDb and you chose one that we can like, oh, and all the rest are like, nah.
And I don't think it's a fabrication. I do. I want to believe that it's real. And please, someone make a comment below and say it's not real. I saw him lose it on set, but I never. And I look at people like that. So there can be an existence of being that way. And it's important that these people are highlighted in our lives. Maybe it's just legend, but at least it gives us something to base it on, and we can then go into our other creative endeavors and personal lives, because you can't separate those two things. I don't think you can. Tell me you can.
No, I mean, I think it's hard to make that separation, but it's nice to have idols that aren't false. Like it's nice to hold someone up and, on a pedestal and be like, whether you're in that industry or not, at least that's the way you want to carry yourself, right? In public and hopefully in private, which we're not totally aware of. But there's so few people like that. And I think the nastier you are, there's plenty of examples of that, like nasty people getting what they want or making millions or cheating people out of whatever, right? Like everyone thinks like that's the way you have to do it. But here's a guy, Keanu Reeves, Matrix, tons of movies before Matrix, but then the Matrix series and now his John Wick series. I mean, he's done things in Hollywood no one ever thought he could. Like he's making movies at the same level as like Tom Cruise. Like the John Wick series, I mean, he's producing it. I mean, he was helping write it. Like he's totally involved in it. Hopefully, my understanding is Tom Cruise does similar things for like Mission Impossible on his movies, right? Like he's heavily involved in the storytelling and all of that. And there's not a lot of people like that are working at that level.
I think when you talk about that level, so you're talking about a high level, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think even for a person like myself, I'm like, do I ever want to work at that level? Where's my comfort level? Mm-hmm. I don't think as filmmakers that we all want to be at that level. Some of us are just fine making our movies and going home, and having a quieter life with an occasional interview like this and talking about it.
Instead of living in the movies.
Yeah, and I don't refer to that because there is a difference between, this is going to sound terrible, but here, I'm going to
bring it.
I'm going to try. There's a difference between gigging in the movie business, okay? And there's a difference in terms of being a voice in the business. And I don't like to gig in the business. I like to really try and push a voice. I really do. I try very, very hard. The gigging to me is just like any other job, right? You're showing up, you're doing work on something that you don't necessarily want to work on. Your heart's not in it. And like I say, there's not that much time. You need to be working on the things that are important to you.
Agreed.
That said, every idiot's going to be like, well, he has 2 kids. How does he support this? He's divorced in the last 2 years. How does he do that? Where did he, You have to turn to your friends. This is where your friendships and your connectivity becomes super important.
Interesting.
You have to be very honest with those people. And that's really something difficult to make happen, to open yourself up and say, I need help. But when you do get that help, then you can go do all those other things. Then you get back up on your feet and you do that. But those friendships that I have are the most valuable thing that I have in my life. And that support. And that could be from someone who I'm in love with. That could be a parent. That could be a sister. That could be a friend. It could be a female friend. It could be a male friend. It could be a friend who hasn't identified. It could be all these things. But that sort of support and those mechanisms and that human connectivity make all the difference on your journey. You must have that to be successful. And if you don't have it, you have no reason to be successful because you have nothing to share.
Interesting. Here's one for you. I think a lot of people, especially younger folks, have replaced real human-to-human friendship connections with online friends or followers or fans. And I think that when they do go through a crisis or something like that, they have very few people to fall back on who can actually help them. I think that's a pretty lonely place to be.
Or they isolate. I think we're, I don't know. I think we all isolate at some point because we just want attention. We're like, hey, remember me over here? And then you disappear and everyone's like, what happened? And then if you disappear for too long, you just don't exist. And I think it takes it. I can say through my trials and tribulations, and being an artistic, creative person is not easy. I will not get on here and be like, you should do it. It's easy.
No, it's a nightmare.
25, 30-year journey.
Yeah.
It's ups and downs in relationships, and the hardest relationship you will have will be the one you have with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's really tough. And then how not to have that affect your other relationships.
Mm-hmm. How
that doesn't transpire into being like, you're too emotional, or you're not equipped. You're equipped to do this, or you're so out there that then suddenly in your mind I'm unrelatable. No one understands me. And I think we'll have this conversation about mental health. We'll have that publicly, but I don't think we talk about the relationship that we have with ourselves enough.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about how it's the sympathy of other people with our mental health, but we don't talk about internally, like, what is it that I can be doing to help myself in this and not exploit. I think that's maybe a powerful word, but exploit your emotions to be sympathetic for me. How can we just be strong?
Together,
but also by ourselves. Yeah. How can we be strong for ourselves?
I don't think enough people ask themselves those questions. And you want to know why? I don't think people spend enough time alone. And again, like you said, you have to do things alone. Like, you went down to Patagonia, you fucking put everything in the backpack, mm-hmm. and you walked for 5, 6, 8 days, whatever. But those days are alone. You're alone with your thoughts. You're thinking. It's meditative. And not enough people give themselves that time. I started going out to Tibet and stuff like that when I was super young, and I was alone or with just one friend, but we would hike for hours in silence. You're alone with your thoughts. You're plotting who you are, what you want to be. Like, you're writing the narrative for your life, right? And not enough people do that. They don't spend enough time alone to really figure out and ask the hard questions. So they're just constantly with their friends or in public, just bouncing around with no depth of understanding of who they are or what they want.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. This isn't everybody, but I'm a pleaser, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like to make people happy.
Thanks for coming on the podcast today, by the way.
Well, you're paying me, so be honest about that. Not true. Don't come to this podcast if you're trying to make money.
Just the guy in the Escalade's waiting for you outside, by the way.
Waiting out there, you can hear that studio's not that thick. You can hear the idle outside of the VW Volkswagen Beetle from the 60s, which is my Uber ride home because I can't get the X service. Where was I? Because I just went on a hysterical tangent, which no one's going to laugh at.
Being alone, coming through things on yourself, spending time out in nature.
I think spending, like what you're saying, spending time out in nature is important. But I think as a giver, like, you have to figure out what the reciprocation is of those relationships as well. So you have to have a strong relationship with yourself. And here, I'll tell a personal story. So, you get divorced, you go out in the world and you start dating, and you were the giver and you were the giver in the relationship. And then you're like, well, it's just, what society are we in now? Are we in a giver society? And I say we should be in a meet in the middle society.
Mm-hmm.
We should be able to realize that, like, our experiences are the strength. And I'm not talking, I'd say single, like, I'm talking about you're looking for friendships. You're looking for love, you're looking for connectivity. And I think where we are right now is we're not transpiring to that place anymore, unfortunately. Like, we're not trying to connect. Our political battlefields are so disruptive. We saw this weekend what transpires and in being an American and our thought to what an American is. And I'm not, what kind of American am I? I think that was the quote in a film this year. What kind of American are you? And I'm not. I'm a human being at the end of the day. And this just happens to be the place that I was born in. It wasn't by choice. Could have been born anywhere.
God forbid Canada. Oof.
Well, thank God it was in the Toronto suburbs. That would have been rough. It's cold.
The worst.
Nice.
The worst. So
no, I grew up on the beaches of California, so I'm not gonna lie to you. Not too bad. But it's the search. I think you should always be searching for the deeper meaning of life. Without rambling on about this, if that's not what you're waking up for, and you're not trying to find the next story of your life, then what's the purpose? God, I'm not saying go out and jump off a bridge. Okay, don't be dramatic about it. As a creative person, and I wink, we've all thought about it. Don't act like you haven't. We've all gotten to that point where what is the purpose of this? But then you wake up one day and you're like, hey, the greater purpose is you should just keep asking questions. If your curiosity is done, then why are you here? So my kids help in that. The relationships I have with people help in that.
I think you nailed it. The curiosity. If you don't wake up curious every day, you're not going anywhere. It doesn't matter what ambition you have. If you have the ambition of having your day job or your desk job and you want to do that, great. If you want to make content or tell stories, great. If you want to take over the world and become an evil dictator, great. But if you're not curious, nothing starts and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, curiosity should not be an age.
Agreed, yeah.
I think a lot of people think when you get to a certain age, and I hear it all the time, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or you shouldn't be thinking about that, or people are like, oh, young people, they think a certain way, and it's so funny. To me, I'm so curious about how the next generation thinks and the generation before that, because I've got a couple of generations behind me at this point, and I can look at them and say, oh, I really identify with that. It really reminds me of when I was that age. And I don't use that as a weapon, oh, I remember when I was your age.
And then give them advice. You got to do this and this and this.
No, I'll give certain advice about, I think this could be a mistake. Just be forewarned that you might get in trouble for doing this or know what this might be as a result of. But I think the openness, I hope that when I'm 70, 80, that I can just sit and I can listen to people in my generation or the next generation, which... who knows? Will they be robots? Maybe. That I can listen to them and be like, okay, there's something to be learned here. And hopefully we can all learn from this. Hopefully our society can be, sounds so kumbaya, give me a drum or something. That's where I should be.
Drum roll, please.
But that's where my attitude is today.
You know what I love doing more than anything in the world is speaking at schools.
Really?
Yeah. Because what I do is, so I do speaking events all around, and, you do big corporate events, like Microsoft offsite, 100 senior managers or whatever, you do a thing for them or
team building.
Yeah. And that's fine.
Ryan in here is going to be our team builder today.
And I talk about how to manage a filming team at 24,000 feet on the side of a mountain, right?
He's on a motorcycle. And just climbing a mountain.
All good. But the things I love the most are going to high schools or universities, and they end up being all the prep schools on the East Coast a lot. And I go in there and I'm like, no guidance counselor or anyone in your school, in an authoritative position will be able to lead you down the career that I have currently had and am still having. And I'm here to tell you that alternatives do exist. And I tell the kids my story. I graduated here, but instead of doing that, I tried this. And I went to here, and instead of doing that, I tried this. And I just give them this idea that you don't have to be a doctor, lawyer, banker, or whatever, right? And I'm just trying to get them to
there's
think.
There's no straight line.
There's no straight line, but a lot of kids who are 16, 17, 18, they have no fucking idea. And they just don't know how to get into these things. I just told you at the beginning of this podcast, how I fund my shows, right? And I'm open about that. I want people to know how I do everything, because I want them to know that if you want to do this and you're willing to put 10 or 15 years of real work into it, then you can actually do it. And this is how you have to start. But if you do it and then you do it for 12 months and you haven't reached your goals and then you want to quit and do something else, that's going to take you another 10 to 15 years to do. Nothing happens in less than 10 years, unless you're like Justin Bieber.
True. That's true. But not all of us can be.
No, luckily.
Justin.
Yeah, it does happen for some of us quickly, but then that can't be the goal, right?
Well, I think you bring up a subject where you were talking about Mr. Bieber, and then we're talking about Keanu Reeves. These are anomalies
For sure.
in society. They're not truths. I think you have to look at yourself and turn off the social media thing for a day. I look at, like, I'm really into Marcus Aurelius now.
From Gladiator?
It's a joke. But I'm really into Stoicism.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the practice of it quite seriously, because and I'm going to get this wrong, right? Because I'm still learning about it.
We're paraphrasing here.
Yeah, we're paraphrasing. But I like that you're not going to put too much of yourself into one investment, right? And you're not going to give yourself, you're not going to be too hard on yourself. You're going to learn from the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to live in the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we don't allow ourselves that anymore. We have to come up with a quick rhetorical comment, or a tweet, or an X or a TikTok. And we don't give ourselves the ability to breathe. We feel this immediacy. And if that's how you're operating, or we don't give others a chance to breathe too. That's a lesson I'm learning too, like with developing new friendships and new relationships, that my persistence is not that great in that arena, that this is where I can learn. And if you're not identifying it, sometimes it takes a couple of times. And for me to sit here and tell you that, like, my God, people are going to listen to this and be like, he's right, super persistent. Why do they keep bothering me? But these are the lessons that we have to learn. These are the evaluations we have to learn as people, is how do I perceive myself and how do others perceive me? And what is that truth?
Mm-hmm.
And then what am I comfortable with? And I think some people's comfort level is blocking people.
For sure.
And that to me, you learn nothing. You just learn that you're closing your own doors on your own emotion. And that's men and women. We close these doors and we go, wow. And then there's people who just float at another level. We've talked about those where you're like, wow, you're just so comfortable. Like, we can all hope to strive to be like you.
Mm-hmm.
But please be patient with the rest of us who aren't there yet. We'll be at gate 49, arrival at 10 p.m. tonight.
I think you nailed it. Like, that comfort, like staying in your comfort zone is the death of everything, like death of creativity, death of forward momentum, death of curiosity.
It is.
I remember I went to China when I was 22, and it was probably the most uncomfortable thing I've done, like, in my life. And I thank God, or whatever exists out there in the universe. I'm not religious, but I don't know why I said that, but it just came out.
He has to say that because I was going to ask him.
But just that idea of, like, going outside your comfort zone and living in it and not knowing where it's going to take you is so powerful, and not being afraid to do that. Like, so my adventures are so all encompassing, right? Like, you have to be 100% in, you have to throw everything into it. You can't be wavering. It's not like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's the same as filmmaking. Like, you find a script, you find a director, you get your actors, and then you go 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, nonstop, balls out.
I wish we had that kind of budget. Keep going with that. Sounds good. You're just building me up here. Do it.
It's inspiring.
90 days.
90-day budget for full.
15 grand. 90. No catering.
No catering.
Yeah, no talent. Just B-roll.
No air conditioning.
Just nothing.
But this idea of going all in with nowhere to go but forward. I love that. Like, this is the definition of, like, mountain climbing, right? Or the motorcycle trips I do. Like, there's just no stopping. Like, you go out for 60 days. So I'm going to Argentina. Like, you mentioned Patagonia earlier. Like, I'm going to Argentina in October.
Congratulations, by the way, yesterday on Argentina and their Copa victory. They beat Colombia. Messi now is just proven to be the best ever.
The news cycle this weekend did get caught up with a few other things, and I missed the Copa Americana.
Like what?
I don't know. I think there might have been.
Doherty.
Oh, we did lose Shannon Doherty. I saw that.
Some really amazing people. I think it's a shame in all this news cycle we lose perspective. I mean, we lost two kind of icons.
Donald Sutherland, what was a couple weeks ago? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Fucking legend that guy was. Josh Brolin had the best comment about him. He's like,
Josh Brolin always has the best. Josh Brolin, if you're out there, because I see you at Point Doom quite often, you do have really good material, and you do the "Hey brother" thing.
he wrote, he's like, Donald Sutherland hails back to an age when actors did LSD to channel other versions of themselves or other stuff. Like he was just like, he's a version of an actor that no longer exists, and we should all cherish that. And I was just like,
Yeah.
but yeah, this idea of like investing 100% in something and just pushing it through right to the very end, like not giving up at any like that is so romantic and so fucking sexy. And that is just such an epic way to live. And I think that's what drew me to this style of storytelling, where you can put it all on the line every day, and you just have to do it. It's for me that's everything.
Yeah, I think people don't talk about this. I mean, your lifestyle is on camera, right? Like you're doing these adventures. Like I've watched some of your material. Like your lifestyle is actually being photographed.
Except this podcast, which is audio only. Sometimes.
It's a shame. I keep looking in the monitor and I'm like, you know, pluck that one thing. By the way, this is a funny story. So I told you this before we got on.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going on things like this, you're like, oh, I haven't done this. Like, what should I do? What should I wear?
Yeah.
You know, and he's obviously got the Nike advertisement here, which is good for you.
Head to the gym right after this.
Head to the gym right after this. I won't tell this story. It's too embarrassing. You can add it in here, but a friend like plucked a little, you know, she's like, you gotta get.
Men need tweezers and they need to know how to use them from time to time. Yeah, but I do. I live my life, on camera. It's okay for the moment. I'm going to start doing live shows again.
You are.
Yeah. Okay. So again, these corporate events that I was doing, I'm going to be taking that on the road. So I'm going to be doing like a little one-man show, like a night of adventure with Ryan, like a little bit comedy, a little bit storytelling, a little bit multimedia, video, pictures, and then all this. And I'm just trying to figure out if I'm going to do it across the United States the same way like a comedian would do it, like book out venues and things, or whether I'm going to just do it in Vegas and do like a kind of residency where I'll just go to Vegas on the weekends and do 2 shows a night. But I'm super keen on
Wow. That's so cool.
Well, I really want to connect with more people, and the corporate audience is great. It's well paying. I'm thankful for those jobs, and I respect everyone I have the chance to work for and meet. But I really want to like meet more everyday people and really see if I can like build an audience of people who just want to travel but haven't had the courage, or if I can kind of inspire someone to get out and like see more of the world. I think it's great. Like Anthony Bourdain, you know, rest in peace. He was my absolute idol. You know, he passed away in 2018, but he had a one-man show and he was traveling all around the United States talking about food, drinks, his addiction issues, his travels. And I went to see him a few times and I was absolutely inspired by him. And I don't think there's anyone in that space anymore who's traveling around the US like and talking about what it means to be like a global traveler and someone who's like a global citizen. And I think that a lot of people will really appreciate that message, I hope.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're talking about that message, he's definitely a master of moving past the feel sorry for me moments.
Of course.
You know, and just being like, okay, I'm a human. I've got some chinks in the armor.
We all do.
And I'm going to tell you this story, and this is what's kind of been my thing. I think something else you bring up too, people don't realize as like filmmakers how nomadic we are.
Oh my God.
Like we have no home.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll come back to my place after 2 months, you know, and then I also have kids on top of that too, which sometimes I don't see for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be committed. And then imagine you've got all these other things. You've got family, you've got maybe potentially a new relationship, and you're pulled in all these different emotional things. And then I look at people who do it on a larger scale and I'm like, how do they even have time for this? So I think this is the one piece of advice. If you think you're going to have control over your life, then this is not a good field to get into.
I think that's true.
You have to figure out what the control is for you and what your tolerance. And I'm not talking about pain tolerance because you've chosen to be in this. So you've given yourself your own pain and your own affliction. And people are like, why is he talking about this on such a surface level? But to get deep, it's like, yeah, I miss my children. I want to focus on this movie and make it the best film that I can. I need to worry about my ex-wife and co-parenting. How's that relationship? I'm trying to build a new relationship. What about my friends? Oh God, I haven't talked to my friends for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
I'm losing my connectivity to that. And I can't imagine that you don't go through those same things when you're traveling around the world and you don't have the ability to even text because you're in the middle of nowhere, and then you start to feel cut off. So what do you do with those emotions? How do you handle those emotions?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're just so disconnected, you're like, I don't need stuff.
You get very disconnected very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, but one thing you said earlier, which I really appreciated, was you said, when you were going through a difficult moment, your friendships and the people you really trust to be yourself around, you really reached out to them and they kind of like saved you, or they were there for you when you needed them.
Yeah.
And then you think about like, okay, well, now we're in this creative industry where we're nomadic and we're traveling and we're 100% focused on work all the time. And I've lost so many friendships because I just haven't been able to give people the time that they deserve. And it's all on me. It's 100% on me. But it's just like, when you go for 4, 5, 6 months without talking to people because you're so involved in what you're doing, like I actually find this work so isolating, and it does put a lot of strain on every single relationship you have. And if you're not in a relationship with someone who understands that, who also might be in a creative field, who can tolerate it and who knows what it means to be like 100% invested into something for 30 straight days, then everything's always going to fall apart.
Yeah. It's tough. And you've obviously been married a few times.
Just previously once, but...
Previously once?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want...
10 years, though. I got my 10-year medal.
I wanted to give you the couple because it make me feel better. So we'll just re-record that part.
Yeah, we will.
3 marriages.
And one is good, though.
One is, let's talk about marriage for a second. I think we have these societal values that marriage is going to bring us this fantasy of a house, family, all that stuff. I think that's a good prescription.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think it's nice to have something to go home to.
Mm-hmm.
Is it practical in the way that we've built these institutions? Or do we need to step back and we say, well, what works for me?
Well, you have to understand, like, society, media, and marketing is pushing a 1960s version of having a family on us today. And I think that's the big problem. Like, you look at my dad's generation, our parents' generation, right? Like, you could be a small business owner or work at a company and be middle management and still buy a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, let's get married and have some kids and put them in the fucking house. And now we got some bedrooms, right? And that was expected. And nowadays, like, everything's so expensive. Divorce rates are through the roof. It's so easy to meet new people. Via online dating, Facebook, Instagram, fucking just everything. Like, it's just so easy to meet new people. Like, back in the day, like, you had to go out to meet people. Now you can meet people on a phone, on an app, doing something.
Yeah, I do that.
But it's out there, right?
You do that? Have you done that?
I have done it in the past.
I have my ex on a phone app.
I'm
trying to find the receipt. Honestly. Like, if I can find the receipt, like...
I met my ex-wife. I met her before on the online dating rage, so I actually had to meet her. But the point is like, it's too easy to meet people. Like, it's you know too much now. Like, if your significant other is being shitty, like, it's too easy to look elsewhere.
I think so.
And I don't think we're invested in these relationships as much anymore because of that. Because, like, I don't think we cherish what we have enough, because we're being bombarded by everything else that's out there all the time.
No, it's whatever. We're also in a town too of a high sexual stimulus, right? Like, this is a good-looking town.
There's good-looking people in LA.
There are good-looking people in LA, and
outside of this podcast studio.
Well, yeah, like, through that window, there's even the window washer that I'm looking at right now is pretty good looking.
I keep telling him to keep a shirt on.
Yeah. Okay, we're back. But I think, we're in a society full of distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy to walk away from an emotional connection and be like, oh, I'm just going to replace that with another shiny object. It's hard to stay put and commit to something and play it all the way through. Even if it's not going to work out, you got to play it all the way through. You got to play everything. As actors always say, I'm going to play it for keeps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to break this role. until it's done. And then I think people don't want to be harmed. They don't want to be vulnerable, because we live in a society that does not promote vulnerability. And if it is, then it's full victimhood. I'm a victim of this person's narcissism, of their gaslighting. And I think that we have to have a little bit more personal responsibility.
Sounds good.
This.
Yeah.
And I think this is the reason why I'm here today.
Okay.
Is to promote self-worth, not ego, but self-worth, to say, you can do this. I'm not talking about as a filmmaker. I'm talking as a person. Like, we can do this. But you might not have the I hear all these cliches. You might not have the tools.
Mm-hmm.
But your curiosity should be there to become you don't have to become the most interesting person in the world. You don't have to become the most successful person in the world to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be that. You don't have to have those things to be kind either. And we've lost a little bit about that, but I feel like here today I found that with you.
Oh, that's nice. Curiosity and kindness.
And happiness. I'm happy to be here. I'm present right now.
I'm glad to hear
I
it.
forgot about my phone. Wow. Big steps. It's like right there too. It's been there the whole time. It's white and it's bright and it's like alluring.
Yeah.
Probably eliminated.
It's already listening to us.
Yeah, it is. It's already released this.
It's live streaming it on another platform. Kindness and happiness. I agree. It's pretty powerful and pretty exciting. I mean, honestly, like, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to set up this podcast was I want to have conversations with people with no agenda, number one. Number two, I didn't know anyone in LA, so it's a really wonderful way. Like, I have an interesting resume, so that's been enough to attract people like yourself who I'd never met face to face before, to be like, okay, I'll give this guy a chance, right? So that's been great too. But I also feel like I had a real empathy problem for decades, where I was just doing stuff and I didn't really care about other people. And having a chance to sit down and like really engage with people in this way has made me much more empathetic and much more. I've always been interested in other people's stories, but it was always like, as a journalist, where you would try not to feel it. Yeah. But I think meeting people here in this environment and learning about other people's stories, you feel more. It's not like, oh, I'm here for the New York Times and I have to be, objective. Like, I can be subjective. I can hear your story and be like, yeah, man, I feel you. Like, I get you. Like, you can't really do that as a journalist because you're supposed to let the audience decide or the readers decide. Exactly. No one does that anymore, of course. I'm talking about when I worked for the New York Times in like 2005, when it was still a real fucking newspaper. But nowadays it's all just editorialized and it's all just, there's no objectivity. But the journalism world should still be objective. But here you can be different and you can really make connections. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing that you trick people into coming in here.
And unburdening themselves.
Your therapist decided, no.
It's great therapy.
I mean, it is great therapy. And I think we're afraid. I think we're afraid of great therapy.
For sure.
I think we're afraid of looking in the mirror. Or we're in a culture of selfies in which have major touch-ups now.
Mm-hmm.
You can pretty much look however you want to a degree, and attract people to you. But can you open up and show your true self? That's really
tough.
That's really tough.
This weekend I was owning my bikini selfies.
You were. That's good. I knew you were going to get sarcastic as soon as we got deep. I could feel it. It was going to happen because I was right there too.
I know you wanted to. No, but
I wanted to, but then I'm like, oh, there go the ratings.
I mean, here we can go deep. I agree. Like, that idea of looking at yourself in the mirror and actually looking back at it and figuring out where you're going and what's going on. Like, that's scary. Like, that is
super scary.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about scary moments in life, walking out of your family house, divorced with 2 kids, and being like, what are my kids going to think when I leave this house?
Mm-hmm.
Instinctually, you're like, I shouldn't leave. This is where my children are.
Yeah.
The other part of you says it's unhealthy to be here as a person
mm-hmm.
anymore. And that's no reflection of my ex. That's just personal. Like, okay, this was the family unit. It's over. Everyone tells you that.
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you go from there? And so you wind up in places like Patagonia.
I know that's what Patagonia was made for.
Yeah, you go on walkabout, you meet other people there, and then you realize you didn't have to go to Patagonia.
No.
You didn't have to. You needed to at that moment. But that's the philosophy. You still have that ability to go walk in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at you, I'm like,
yeah, it's true.
I mean, because I look at that and I have that mentality, go shoot 10 films in a row, don't come home, see the kids a little bit at the failure of the parental unit, like the shame, going through all those emotions, or not wanting to be so connected to people. We as people who move a lot, there's something, I think, deep inside of us that's hiding from normal consistency, which might be frightening to us at the end of the day. Might be.
I thrived on not being normal. Yeah. And anything that propelled me into that not normal sphere, I jumped at. So when someone offered me a chance to do 8 episodes of something and it was going to be brutal, like obviously I would talk to my significant other or whatever and be like, what do we think? Is this going to put pressure on our relationship?
You've already made your decision.
In a lot of ways, yes. But then also, too, your partner will be like, well, this is your dream and this is what you've been waiting for and now it's happening and I'm not going to be the one to hold you back. But then, of course, if you go out and do this, like you get isolated, you get fucking out in your own world and then you become, you lose your mind a little.
Yeah. Nice.
And then, and things break down around you. But I think that's, I don't know, in a lot of ways, that's the creative process, too, is having things kind of break down around you and then trying to rebuild them or trying to save them or packing it up and moving on. Like, I think moving on is a super helpful thing. Just like, I wouldn't say burn bridges, but changing direction and rebuilding in a new direction is amazing. And I actually think one of the biggest problems about being married or having a partner for many years is like, I always feel like you meet your partner when you guys are always like around the same level, career success-wise, financially maybe too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I'm here. Oh, and you're here too. And we like the same things and we kind of have the same budget and we kind of go to the same places and okay, this is great. But then over like a 5 or 10 year period, one of you is going to go like that. Like no one ever goes like that. So, and then of course there maybe that creates some tension. One of you is growing. One of you stops being curious. One of you wants to be more curious. Someone wants to slow down. Someone wants to speed up. Someone's getting opportunities. Someone isn't. And without bulletproof, amazing communication, that breaks down.
Yeah, and I spoke about this before, and I didn't mean this in like a condescending way about film, because I think this is relative, because you're talking about careers, that some of it is just gigging a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what a great way to make a living and be in a creative field. But then the other part of it is extremely hard, forging a path. And that in a relationship it's a personal journey. It's a lonely journey, even when you're with somebody. And it doesn't have to be lonely, though. That's my whole point, is you can do it together. Just depends on how much strength you have as a person. If you're not strong, you won't make it. And I think about friendships, I think about family, and I think about all those support mechanisms that within this journey, if you're a creative person or you're adventuring across the world like you did, right? If you just keep coming back to the same thing, which is nobody, eventually you'll just come back to yourself. And then you look at yourself and you say, what kind of person am I? And then you decide, what is it that I need? But some people never get there.
That's true. Yeah,
they don't, even in a relationship. And I don't say this is this is Ryan's relationship episode. This is where we open some doors. I'm talking about friendships. I'm talking about connectivity with other people too. I'm talking about your work environment. And you will be judged on opening those doors. But if you own just who you are, or even trying to find yourself, my God, that's the curiosity. You should be trying to find yourself every day. And you should be awkward about it too. My God, practice being awkward every day.
You know, You know what I found very insulating and very isolating, and this is actually a positive that I pulled out of it for many years. So I was able to work with pretty much the same team for just over 10 years. So same camera guys, essentially, same 3 rotating camera guys, and Chad, my director of photography, and my 2 other camera operators, Jesse and Dan, and we formed like a real family and a connection because we were traveling the world together for years, completely isolated from anyone else, and it was those bonds and those friendships that I think became stronger than anything outside of my career. And that was also a real problem, is that we became so close. We had so much fun. Like, it's not at all at the same level of seriousness, but it's like going into battle with the same people all the time. It's like the same mentality. Yeah. We're going to climb this fucking mountain. People are dying. All right, let's go. And it's like a band of brothers and we're out there.
Yeah.
And I think that...
Well, it's a high too.
Fuck, the address
is super high. Like, I get it. Like, I've been in those circumstances, not as often.
Sure.
But you come back and you try and decompress from this adrenaline you've been on and this movement. When you move a lot, you get very high. You get super positive about certain things. You come back and you're in Starbucks.
Pure depression.
It's the scene in Hurt Locker. It's the cereal aisle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is. And that sounds extreme. So when I think about vets coming back to that, or if I just think about people who have a really high octane kind of lifestyle, and sometimes I do too, you have to realize what you're coming back to. And some people like look at you like, oh my God, you're too much.
Yeah.
Or you don't know how to communicate at a more, maybe a reasonable level because you're so amped up all the time. And I think that's where creative people get to be misconceived, right? Because your emotions do run. Not everybody. I mean, look at Chris Nolan. I'm like, God, that guy's as calm as a Hindu cow all day, right? He's just making decisions, creative decisions. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he's not. Or maybe that's how we want to perceive these people as being the most confident people in the world. Mm-hmm. But I can't imagine human beings, for when I know about them and having interviewed them or directed them or produced for them, that everybody is 100% confident.
That's true. That's true. But you hit on something really important, is like when you go out and make something or tell some stories or have some adventure, when you come back, the dopamine drop off is intense.
Very intense.
Yeah. And if you've been away for a month and you have a significant other or partner and you come back and they haven't seen you for a month and you're depressed, that's a tough bridge to cross, because you're coming back, they're super excited. They expect you to be super excited, and all you're doing is coming off this high of working for a month straight, which is such a beautiful feeling. It fills so many of your creative passions. But then you basically come back empty to your partner, and that can be absolutely soul destroying, because this has happened to me. And unless you're with a partner who knows that for the next 2 weeks you're going to be a completely shitty person, like not shitty, but just down. Yeah. Unless you're with someone who knows how to manage that with you and you can communicate that efficiently.
If you can communicate it.
Right. A lot of it.
That's the other thing. Like, that's the lesson I learned right now, is how to communicate that.
Yeah.
How to be like, yo, it's not a great day for me. And not, because I think so many people have the expectation that my day is supposed to be great every day.
Because you're doing what you want and you live in Southern California.
Exactly. So you have a tendency to almost lie to yourself in a weird way and be like, I'm doing great. The reality is you just want to turn and be like, that's pretty awful. That's pretty awful what happened to me. But I'm going to tell you the great things that happened in my day. And I think that's where you start to really know yourself.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
That's the deep part of it. Anything else? You want to talk about some creativity? Future projects?
Yeah. What
are we working on something together? As soon as we leave this, we're like going on this adventure bike thing over to.
There's no time limit on this at all, so you feel free to let me know whenever you have to head out. Like 3 hours, 4 hours, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, we've got. Look at this. We've got 13 hours we can run on this if we need to. But I want to go back. I would love to go back to you. So you're in Santa Barbara doing fucking radio, and then you're like, I'm gonna move to San Francisco. And then you're like, I'm going to go to NYU. Like, what made you just move all the way across the country? Why didn't you come back to California, Southern Cal, and do like USC filmmaking? Like, what made you want to go to NYU and get into the New York lifestyle? Because that's a huge move. Like, a lot of people, going coast to coast is a big deal, especially when you're young.
I think what it is there's always something inside of me that wanted a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a story. This is going to sound either really great or awful. I like the adventure. I like the storytelling part of my life. It's a huge part of who I am.
Yeah.
And so even in going into a narrative field, I still feel like there's a narrative about me that I'm still wanting to tell. And I'm getting a little bit further away from that as I get older,
Mm-hmm.
of just being separated from that. I think when you're younger, you do it for egotistical reasons, so you have something to talk about it at a party. As I get older, it's more about the philosophy or the philosophical parts of my life, like what is the deeper meaning? You do get to a point where you want to have a deeper meaning. So when I was a young person, and I was such a terrible student. I mean, we talked about this earlier. I never turned in any homework all the way to my senior year in high school. And I think I had a 1.87 graduating. I don't even think that's passable, but they're just like, get this guy out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't want to take him for year 13.
You weren't causing fights or selling drugs. You just didn't care?
I think what it was is I was always good on the social commentary. So I was distracting in a classroom because I didn't like, as a young person, I didn't like prescriptions. And I felt like education was very prescribed. This is what you're going to learn. This is how you're going to learn it. And if you don't understand how to learn it this way, or if you're not digesting it our way, it's going to be tough for you.
Mm-hmm.
And in the school system, I didn't understand how to play the game. Some kids learn really quick. They're like, if I do this, I'll get rewarded and I'll be a star student. I thought being a star student was just questioning everything in my classes. And so I became what you might refer to as a class clown,
Mm-hmm.
or as an instigator of thought. I mean, maybe that's too lofty at like 14, but I constantly would question my teachers, and because I felt forced to be in an environment I didn't want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to fail, at least I'll let it be known that I'm failing, and this is the reason why I'm failing. And, you know, my parents sent me to private school hoping that would change things, and it did. I became a decent writer, even though everything was grammatically incorrect. So I became a storyteller, and that's where I really learned, was in a year of private school. And then I went back to public school and failed, graduated without honors, no honor. And then I worked, I did a little bit of, I played ice hockey, grew up in Southern California playing ice hockey, played travel ice. Wound up getting recruited for this roller hockey league in New Mexico and played a couple of games there and got my face bashed in. So I learned how to toughen up. And then one day I fell in love with this woman. God, this is how it always goes, right? Of course. She was like, how old was she? I'm going to blow her up too bad here because we're still good friends. But she was like 6 years my senior, and I was like 18, and she was into her 20s. And that sounds awful, but we were really compatible on a lot of levels. And so I moved to San Francisco, showed up with a U-Haul truck at my parents' house with this woman who they'd never met. I had this full relationship with her. I'm like, I'm moving to San Francisco. I'm going to give it another try.
Wow, that's ballsy.
And I need some money.
That's even more ballsy.
Yeah, because San Francisco is expensive. And I want to go back to school and give this another try. And for some reason, it just clicked. I was out of my environment. It's that thing. You need to be an agent of change. You need to provide your own change, your own adventure. And that's when I started to realize that I could just create my own narrative, that I could write my own story, and that I had really convinced my father, who was very instrumental in helping me with that change. And I always worked full-time. I had a full-time job since I was 14 years old. I've always worked. I've always had an income. Not always a great one. Sometimes more of an outcome than an income.
Yeah.
And I went to San Francisco City College, and this is so interesting. Like, I was a minority for the first time in my life. It was a feeder school for UC Berkeley, huge Chinese population. It was a way to go from San Francisco City College to Berkeley. And those kids, oh my gosh, were so smart. I thought it was just going to be a walk in the park. And I applied what I had learned in sports. You played sports. I was a very competitive hockey player. And I was very competitive in the radio space too. And I decided that I would just walk in every classroom and make it a sport. We're all on the curve. So I'd just be like, all right, I'm going to study for 20 hours. I would ace the test, ace it, set the curve, get up in the classroom and be like, try and catch me. See if you can do it.
And did that work?
Arrogant. And it did. It worked for me. It did, because I felt like that was the first time I had a victory lap in my life in terms of education. And it was kind of, this is not the same equivalent, but it's that Goodwill Hunting moment, right? Where I would show up to speech and debate and I would have a black eye from playing ice hockey the night before, doing a travel tournament. And then I would go against my opponent and then I would ace the debate.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to build your confidence. And you start to learn what kind of person you were. So that experience and those professors at that point, and those professors were super diverse. I had one guy that was like an ex-gangster in the Mission District. I had another one that was a protester, a gay rights protester all the way back in the 80s, and she was amazing. And I learned all these different personalities and how to really interact. That was true education to me, unlike when I transferred to NYU, which was private education. It was, it was a great honor to be at NYU. And NYU was great for cultivating stories. And I work with a lot of people that I graduated with still to this day and have that connectivity. But that sort of San Francisco moment of true artistry and true identification was such a pivotal part of my life. And I look back at that city college and I say, wow, I learned so much about who I am, and it helped me so much in my career.
It's almost like you're rewarded for going outside your comfort zone at that moment, and then it clicked, and it's like, oh fuck, I need to do this all the time.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
I think when I get comfortable, I want to run.
Oh well, yeah, for sure.
Right, where I'm like, whoa, this is too comfortable. This is too homogenized.
Mm-hmm.
This is too much of the status quo. Like, I can't fit into this box.
Or like, like, because producers, like you're a producer, I produce my own shows, you produce films, like we're problem solvers, right? So if you're not using enough of your brain, right away. And it's like, and then after like a week or a month go by, you're like, fuck, I'm not firing on all cylinders. Like I need to be doing something where I'm like using my entire brain, or at least the impression that you're using your entire brain, right? Like, and we need problems to solve. Like we need films to make, we need stories to tell. Like and if you're not constantly being approached with problems, you're not doing it. You're not doing the gig.
Yeah. I think as a producer too, people take that title and they're like, what does a producer do? I'm probably a bizarre producer. I mean, I started my career as a cinematographer. Then I just woke up one day and I quit.
Wow. Yeah.
I was like, I'm looking at the producers on set and I'm like, why are they driving in these amazing cars? And I'm struggling to even get here.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of money at the time. I remember my first DP job. It was like, oh, you're going to make $3,500 a day. And I was like, well, little did I know that the next person was making 50.
Yeah.
Right. And
with residuals.
And I woke up to that fact. And so I started writing, and I sold a San Francisco Film Society gave me a grant for $100,000 for a script I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Hope and Ryan Coogler was up there at the time, and I started meeting people loosely connected to other producers like Rick Bosner, who then I trailed, and just incredible people. And I started to think, oh, you don't really have to, when I say this, we're talking about being a producer, you kind of get to be whatever producer you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not just I sit behind a desk and I look at numbers. Like I read scripts. But sometimes I'll jump onto the edit. Like I'll cut half of the film and be like, guys, I think it should be more this way. Like I'm very, very, very involved in terms of the physicality of the production. I'm there with the production. I'm there then at night crunching the numbers. I'm then there rewriting with the director, or helping the cinematographer out, being like, hey, have you thought about shooting it this way? This could be helpful, without being a pain in the ass.
That's the key, is how do you be involved in all parts of the creative process by assisting those creative partners that you've picked versus stepping on their toes, right? It's very gentle.
It's gentle, but I think just honesty.
Yeah.
You're just honest. You're like, this is how I feel about it.
And you have to be working with people that want to be better. And if you can bring advice or if you can bring assistance to them, which elevates their own personal performance plus elevates the project's performance, then you have to surround yourself with people who respect that.
Yeah, I think people... Yeah, there's different kind of producers. There are different types. People don't realize how many different producers there are. There's development people who sit in an office. There's financial producers. There's in-house producers. There's on-set producers. There are schmoozy producers. There are producers who bring in talent. There are producers who are great with story. And I think where I find my place is I'm a producer that just does me. I look at a project and I say, is this interesting? Is there an audience for this? Is this director going to keep making movies? Oh my gosh, that's the number one question I ask myself.
Really, the director.
Is this a one and done? I fear working with directors that are one and done.
Really? Is that a problem in this town?
I think it is. I think they do the first movie, they get depressed and they can't get to set again. Or they think that they have to have the next show needs to be huge, that they need to scale up. The thing that you need to always scale up on is your storytelling, not your budget.
Agreed, yeah.
Oh, people hate hearing that. They hate it. I'll say it again.
Well, scaling up, it's like self-improvement, right? Like you got to improve, you got to go from a B to an A inside you first before everyone else recognizes it.
Just like we were talking about personal growth, you have to do that as a storyteller too. What is it that you're going to deliver on? And where's your risk assessment? You need to take risk or nobody's coming back to you. They need to see, not that you're shiny, you're not trying to dazzle them. You need to tell them something. You need to go sort of deeper into this world of the human experience. And that's always what's going to make a movie better, is that. And that's a hard craft. It's a really high failure rate. Oh, it's a scary little territory, and either some people do it in teams, some people do it individually. I don't think there's one right way or another. I just know what works for me,
At least you figured that out, though. Like, at least you're self-aware enough to know what works for you instead of just bumbling around copying what you think works from other people.
Yeah, you cannot do that.
Right.
You cannot do that. If it's not working for you, if you're working with a group of producers and you constantly in your mind are feeling like an outsider, then you need to move to a new position. And if you've worked hard to be a certain thing, you can't put yourself in a circumstance in which you're not comfortable. It's okay to push yourself in travel to a different country, be uncomfortable, work on a production, but you shouldn't stay in that system if you're not happy in it. I think we all know when we're doing something and we're unhappy, get that little, you're just slightly off.
Yeah.
You don't know why, but you're unhappy. You go through the door, you come home and you're like, wait, I'm working on this big movie, but I'm not happy. You have to listen to your voice and decide what's right for you, not what other people think is success.
How many people just don't get to that level of enlightenment?
Oh, I'm not enlightened.
No, but I think what you just said was quite enlightened. Like that ability, that self-realization is crucial, and a lot of people don't even get there.
I think that you have to, God, this is going to sound awful. You have to kind of hit the bottom to get back to the top.
I believe that fully.
You do, and it doesn't have to be the definition of your journey, and that can be a private thing too. You can just hit it and be like, okay, I did it, and it doesn't have to be your T-shirt. For some people, it's their T-shirt, and for people like myself, I don't want it to be my T-shirt. I just want to be somewhere in the middle and have the narrative maybe to share with a partner, or that, not have to constantly be self-promoting, but promoting promoting. This is what I do. I love making movies, man. Like it's the worst. If you're gonna get addicted to anything, I mean, there'd be better drugs that were way cheaper. Filmmaking is a very expensive drug.
I agree.
To be on. And it's a really disappointing one too, most of the time. And then when you have the 5% where you're like, okay, cool, lasts for like a day. And then you're just back to, your addiction again.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to, could be a whole podcast on how to raise funds for your addiction.
I love that idea.
Yeah. And I don't mean that for future investors that are going to watch this be like, oh, I'm just feeding the dragon here. This guy's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
The addiction is telling the best story possible. I mean, it's such an interesting job. And people are like, oh, filmmaking is such an egotistical, it's such an egotistical business. It's all about you. I think, this is where I'll leave it. Filmmakers make movies, most of them, the ones that I consider to be the filmmakers of the world. They make them because we're taking society, we're looking at what's happening, and we're offering a different commentary on what's happening. We are not the news. We're not documentarians at that point. We're offering our viewpoint of the world. And art has always moved the needle. It has always moved it in a different direction. And it will continue to do that. And so we need to invest in our creative community, or else we become too political, right? Too hegemonic, too fearful. It's the creative people who open us up to things. And we've all watched those movies that are political and you're like, oh yeah, we get it. The first 5 minutes, 90 minutes of this, right? You want us to think this way? That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to open your thought, is to provoke conversation. You get in the car, and if you're not arguing, we didn't do our job.
I like that idea. Yeah. If you're not arguing all the way home,
is this a good movie or is this not a good movie?
No.
And you're allowed to hate a movie. I love it when someone's like, I just didn't like that movie you worked on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, tell me why. And don't defend it.
I'll take your hate over your indifference anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's important. Like, it has to be thought provoking, and if it doesn't go in the direction that an audience member wants, yeah, it should strike them quite hard, right? There's nothing worse than like listening to someone who watched your show while they were on their phone for an hour and watching your show in the background. Like, what's his face? Ronnie Chan he's a stand-up comedian, Malaysian ethnicity, but he's fucking hilarious. And he's on the Daily Show too, and he's got this thing is like, we're just trying to put as many screens in front of ourselves between us and the wall as possible. Like, on the wall, you've got a TV, then you've got an iPad, then you've got your phone. It's just like how many screens can I get between me and the wall? But it's the worst when you people are watching your art or something like that, and not even really paying attention.
I think so. I mean, it's this existence that we have in life, like, it's pretty short-lived, right? If you want to get granular about what it is that we're doing here, we're really just to fulfill ourselves for this just short speck of time. And what is it? Some of us want to lend voice. Some of us just want to be happy. But I think if you're born and you have that calling, we're programmed to basically put that out there and die with that. And then there's other people who just find enjoyment and satisfaction in other avenues.
Consumption.
I look at that, but sometimes I've been jealous of that. I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it just be a lot easier? And then I'm like, I've got this anger in my voice. I'm like, fuck that. That's too simple for me.
Yeah.
You can't ignore who you are. And I think a lot of people do that. And I would anyone who, if I could share any piece of advice, is don't lie about who you are. Just be honest with yourself and other people around you.
But that takes work, and I feel like most people aren't interested in putting in that work to figure out who they are.
It's true. I mean, I will be honest, like, I've been in circumstances, even more recent, where I wasn't totally forthright about my feelings about certain things. And I'll tell you, in life, that gets you nowhere. And the person that gets you nowhere faster is yourself.
Yeah.
And then it gets you in trouble with other people. And I think the diligence to stay on top of that is incredibly important. So important. And it eases your day. It makes you feel lighter and loftier, even though, I'm not talking about making decisions. I'm not pushing the red button, not starting a war. But I think you start wars and you bring conflict in your own life when you can't completely come to terms with certain things and you feel the pressure to have immediate answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like somehow in this podcast, this all wraps up into one little bow, but it is about being kind, happy, and honest. And if you don't have those three things, it's hard to hold on to the other stuff. It really is really hard.
Those are not qualities that are well respected in this town.
Maybe. I'm a native Californian. Can you imagine that? Isn't that weird?
I'm an immigrant, but I'm legally here.
Yeah. We'll look
into that somehow. I've got a lawyer.
Yeah, my kids are half German, so they're EU passport holders. My ex is from Germany, so I definitely have an opinion about I'm a huge, even though I say I'm proud Californian, this is a state of immigrants and immigrants. There's no one from LA that lives here anymore. That's like a rare bird that I meet someone.
Yeah, it's true.
This town.
I think I've had one or two people on the podcast that were actually born in LA.
Yeah, probably lying.
They're probably lying. Yeah. I never checked the birth certificate.
Yeah,
I didn't go that deep.
Get this.
Yeah, I'm already dropping in quality from my New York Times days on the due diligence. I mean, what's it been like for you, kind of going as a film and television producer, or film producer, going through COVID? And also, and
that's a funny story.
Going through COVID. Maybe you were getting divorced during COVID. Maybe you were getting married during COVID.
Maybe it's during COVID.
Yeah, it's like either you got married,
that right? You had nothing else to do. It's like, what are we gonna do? I guess we'll do that.
Babies or pets?
Yeah, babies or pets. Yeah, definite COVID. Kind of pre-COVID. One was pre-COVID, starting into COVID, and then COVID was happening. And then what did I do? This is so fascinating. I always see opportunities in the market.
And what was your COVID opportunity?
But I'm going to say this. So like a lot of people and some freelance producers, and people are going to laugh at this, I worked for sometimes 3 companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't be independent, and that was killing me. I'm like, God, I want to go out and do my own projects and fundraise. But you couldn't. There's no way. So I'm like, I got to get employment because I've got little ones in here, and I've got a mortgage and all this stuff. And I just started freelancing as first it was a little bit of live action with masks, and that was just a disaster. I'm like, God, the expenses of running these operations are so expensive with COVID protocol. There's no profit. I'm losing $10,000-$15,000 a day in profit.
As an aside, I did a podcast chat with a guy who made a killing during COVID by providing all that shit, all the testing, all the screens, everything, because he runs an equipment company, and they were being called out to bring in all these hand washing stations, testing.
Yeah.
He made
I was the guy paying for all that, on these different commercial spots, and it was all content too. There was film production. I saw some people doing it, but you had, for someone who's independent for me, who's trying to make movies at a certain price range, it just wasn't a possibility. It was crushing, and I couldn't get investors, and investors were weary. So I wound up doing a lot of content pieces from can I say it? A lot of animation stuff, animation, motion graphics, and recycled stuff from previous ads with a couple additional shots.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing it in this way, and I hope no one's watching this. I hope I don't offend anyone. I was working for 3 different companies, 3 production companies, and there was people who knew each other at these companies. And I'm like, well, they're not going to forget my name, Oden, as a producer. Eventually I'm going to get caught. And I'm making triple rate. I was making a lot of money.
Well, that's good.
I was making a tremendous amount of money because I was getting triple rate. And my days were 20 hours. Oh, I think I got shingles during all this from the stress. My whole body shut down at one period of this. And it was I'm like, oh, it serves you right. You were lying lying to yourself that you could do this physically, emotionally. But I felt like it was the right thing to do. And it was one of those things. It was a time and place where I'm like, I worked on animation. There's no qualifications for me, but I learned so much about animation. Like now I can speak to hand-drawn animation, motion graphics to a point that's uncomfortable. And worked with these artists seemed like for years, in an intense environment, because you're on with them all day. And it's the only point of connection that you have. We're really cut off. And so when that came out of the COVID era, and I don't think about it too much, dude, I was so busy. I didn't really know that COVID was happening. I know that sounds really arrogant, but I lived up in the Santa Monica Mountains. I was on Zoom calls all day, taking care of my kid. Most people, when they have a child, that's just normal anyways. They're not paying attention. So the timing of it was perfect for me. It was after COVID that was like, what's everybody doing? That's when I'm like, okay, as a filmmaker, now what are we doing?
Because things slow.
Get back to work? No. Then the strike. And then the strike happened. And so I think about it a lot. Where am I going to target? Where am I going to find these filmmakers? And filmmakers just were like, we're done. We're never making a movie. And now AI is here. Oh, now we're done. COVID, the strike, AI. I think if you're ambitious, I think if you have a good idea, nothing changes that at all. I think most people want to have an excuse. We've had plenty. COVID, the strike, AI. We've had tons of excuses. But if you're really a creative person, you go out and create. The difference between a filmmaker and an audience member is filmmakers make movies and audiences watch them. So if you're a filmmaker and you're just watching the world go by, you're just part of the audience now. You're no longer doing your job. And so I will constantly say that. I have a huge Old English tattoo on my back that says that. It's very long. I'll keep it for next time. It's great.
I went through a real interesting phase where I was just totally shell-shocked. So I was filming in Ethiopia in March 2020 when the world closed. So I got stuck in the Simien Mountains in northern Ethiopia on the border with South Sudan. And
it's just not as interesting as the story I just told you. Keep going.
And then we were kind of offline for a few days, and then we got up to the top of this mountain, and then we got up there, and our guide started making tea, and he goes, you guys can check your phones here, because we were up on the top of a mountain, and we got a signal. So then, and then my phone was like blowing up, and I was like, guys, we're done with this production. Let's film a little here, wrap it up, and we're getting the fuck out of here. So we were up there, we called a driver because we had a signal, and it was like 8 hours just running to the road, the nearest road. So we got out to the road, got on the car, we drove all the way back to Addis Ababa, and the whole time we're driving back, it's just country after country is just closing. It was like dominoes. And then by the time we got to Addis Ababa, we didn't even have tickets. We didn't even know where we were going, but thank God the airport was still open. And by the time we got to the airport, I could only fly to Canada, which is where I had a passport for, or Turkey. And at the time I was setting up
transplant.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to Istanbul, because I was setting up some work in Saudi Arabia, and I was going to do this big adventure production there. And then, and I was like, I got to stay in the same time zone or close to the same time. I can't be working all night in Canada, living in like my brother's basement or something, like, because I don't have a home in Canada. And then I ended up in, I left Ethiopia.
Wow.
And they closed their borders like the day after I left. And then I arrived in Istanbul, and the day I arrived, Turkey closed their international borders. And then I was in Istanbul for 4 months. And it was funny because when I was, that first lockdown, I was in Istanbul, I was still working, right? Like, so like, I was like, okay, guys, like if this is a viral thing and it's like a flu, then it'll be done by summer. So I was like, let's line up summer work. And it's like, okay, if I'm in Istanbul, if I can get, the whole idea was like not to have to fly, because flying was a nightmare, like vaccine tests, blah, blah, blah. It's like too much. So I was like, okay, Europe, once we get into Europe, we can travel around Europe totally freely, right? So, okay, great. So I'm going to get out of Istanbul and get to Europe in the summer. That's going to happen. So then I line up all this work in the summer. So actually I got out of Turkey in July when they opened up their borders. and I flew into Slovenia, which was the only country in the EU to open their borders with Turkey, because Turkey didn't really close down, and then the EU punished Turkey for not closing their entire economy down. Right, like this is what I was dealing with. The stress and anxiety was unbelievable. So then I got into Slovenia. Then I rented a car, went to Switzerland, first production. Switzerland was a safe country for Canada. I got my camera guy back from Canada. I got another camera guy, Dan, from Holland. So I was like, okay, I got a team. So we walked across Switzerland. It's like 300 miles, 24 stages. You know, we did the whole thing. It was beautiful. Then we went to Germany, filmed. Then we went to Poland, filmed. Then Malta, Croatia, Montenegro. The thing that flatlined me was the second lockdown, November 2020. So in the US, it was just kind of like, it was totally different. But in Europe was open and free all summer, and we were filming and having fun, and we were back to work, but then November, everything stopped again. And that was the second one. That was the one that broke my back, because then when I started fundraising again in like November, December 2020, and then January 2021, no one wanted to put any money down, because for me, it's like for me, I have to film for 12 months. And then we're editing while we're filming, right? So I'm making episodic TV. So I need at least like a 12-month runway of unrestricted travel.
Yeah.
In order for anyone who gives me money to get any benefit from it 18 months later when my shit comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
But there was no confidence that I would have a 12-month runway of free and unrestricted travel.
Yeah.
So it was impossible. So I was just raising, and all of 2022, I was raising money, nothing. And it was, and I was in the wrong part of the world. I went back to Dubai. I had to get out of Europe because it was closing down. I went back to Dubai. I did the summer in Dubai. Did the winter in Dubai. And then when I came out in the summer of 2022, I was expecting to be right back into filmmaking, and there was nothing. And I was like, there's nothing in Europe. Asia was still closed in 2022. Like, Asia was still very restrictive in and I had filmed in every country in Asia, and then like there was some stuff in Central Asia, but there was no money there. I was having all kinds of difficulty. So I was forced into retirement for almost 3 years just because of the difficulty of international travel restrictions. I think I would have been way better off if I was just in the US, producing in the US, but because I was filming on 5 continents and the rules were constantly changing, and having to keep abreast of all those changes was hugely stressful and time consuming. And then it got to the point where, like, you know, people were like, oh, you're probably never going to work again. And like,
I love that conversation.
Yeah. And people were telling me that all the time. And then even to this day, I've lost all my partners. So like I had corporate partners, they dropped me because I didn't get back to filming fast enough. I had Discovery Channel, like they didn't want a season 2 of a show we made where I won a bunch of awards for, you know, like BBC, you know, said they didn't have any more money for my show, but they'd acquire it if I came up with the money by myself. Like I had like,
so helpful.
Yeah. It was funny. Like, yeah. And I even had one corporate partner ditch me just like 3 weeks ago because I haven't gotten back to making stuff.
Because you're not relevant.
Well, I'm not working at the same pace that I was in 2019. Right. So they saw that as like some kind of failure, I guess. So they dropped me a couple weeks ago, but it's fine. I get it. And I'm coming back slowly, but it's amazing what happened to anyone who relied on international travel to do anything useful. Like, and I thought the funny thing is in 2019, I was like, I wasn't arrogant, but I was like, I got this figured out. I got my corporate partners, I got my speaking, I got my television. Because I'm not going to have all 3 get taken out at one time ever. Right. But then it's like, oh, I'm not allowed to speak in front of 200 people because you can't put 200 people in a room anymore, and you can't fly me to where those people are. And then you saw that, and then the TV show fell apart too. So
it teaches you that larger lesson, which is nothing is permanent, right? And so when you're in the midst of this, and I think about that too, because your stories, like my graduating year in NYU was 9/11. And I lived downtown Manhattan, and I worked in Building 5. That was my like, there was a job I had in building number 5, was an undercover security guard for Borders Books and Music, which is not a job. You just clock in and leave, and then I would go back. I would make my money.
But Tower 5, you were downtown.
I was there, and I wasn't there on the day because I think I would have been a very different story for where maybe I would have gone in my life. But I did go back the next day. And so curiosity, there it is, brought me back. I had an ID and an address, so I had to go back. So I grabbed my camera and I went straight to the rubble. And those are the days that change you. So then like a year and a half later, there's that northeastern blackout.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Went through that. Remember, I was in Grand Central Station, power goes out. Screams of terror, man, and stuff like that. Everyone thought it was another terrorist attack.
Yeah.
People are crawling out of manholes, walking through the dark. And then come forward to 2018, Malibu. I'm living in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Oh, right, when the fires.
And our whole neighborhood gets toasted. Lose 36, 40 houses in 2.5 hours. And it's just a hellstorm of fire. You know, it goes all the way to the ocean, and there's just tragedy, a path of tragedy, and the mountainside is completely ashed for as far as you can see. And we're just in this, and I'm like, wow, it just doesn't matter. I remember being in Thailand during the tsunami too. It's like, don't travel with me, please.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or something awful is going to happen. But I had seen these circumstances sort of by accident. And so when COVID came around, I'm like, like, I know that sounds really smug, but the more stressful circumstances you handle in a lifetime that you see, it makes it easier to handle the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So I know people were taken back by COVID, but I had seen some, to me, were horrific things already. They were really horrific. And it changed the way, it did change a perspective that you have to survive to make it. You have to just keep going. And I look at people all the time, like, especially in LA, and they're like, I just can't. Like, you just don't have it that hard. Like, I never had it hard. I just happened to be a witness. And I say that with great value. I've never been a victim of any of those things. Very lucky. But I'm lucky to have been a witness, to be able to have the empathy for other people and how they look at it and see what the endurance is. And in each of those circumstances, from 9/11 to the blackout to the fire, I saw some people fail afterwards, never get their life back on track.
Mm-hmm.
And other people take it as a lesson and really, really build off of it and become a stronger person that could share with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so when COVID came around, I was like, okay, some of us are going to make this decision. You lost a lot of work. We all lost a lot of work. The world is not the same place as it was prior to this. Certain things are not coming back. We want certain things to come back, but they won't. The world has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you keep reaching back into tomorrow and not look at what's in front of you today, you just can't move forward.
Yeah, those are wise words.
That's a big part of what we're all going through, is being like, what's tomorrow? Guess what, dude? You don't.
I think that's...
Look at this weekend. We had an assassination attempt on a president.
Mm-hmm.
Could that have resulted into a civil war? Very much so. Is there a bunch of people on the news and radio telling us that they had theories about this? Of course they are, because they're quote-unquote experts. This is black swan events.
Mm-hmm.
We have these in our personal life. We have them in large public, COVID, 9/11. Right. We have all these things, and we pretend that we have control over any of this. Blasphemy.
What pissed me off the most was, though, that, and I take, and all of that is well received, and I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. But what pissed me off was the political profiteering and the financial profiteering of COVID.
Yeah, that was, you and I are mad that we didn't come up with the N94 mask, because I sent it to you, and you're like, never going to work out.
Yeah, you had blueprints for it in 2016 when we first met. No,
did. We're working at the hospital together.
But no, I mean, I've kind of made peace with it much more, and I think being here has been a lot more helpful as well. But yeah, it was a really tough couple of years, and coming through the other side of it has been interesting. And again too, like I was making a joke with someone the other day, like, having made almost 50 hours of television by 2020, in my career thus far, you know, I was expecting 2022 and 2023 to just pick up from there. But it wasn't. I had to go back. I'm now at a stage where I'm going back to like 2010 when I had to like grassroots fundraise and get myself into my first production. Like getting back.
That's too different.
Getting back into this after COVID has been harder than getting into it in 2010 when I had never made anything.
Well, because there was momentum.
Oh, there was
momentum, and it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with where we are as a culture. Our momentum,
everything
is really slowed down. So I say this to people, and I say this earnestly. I say, you have to create your own momentum. You cannot wait for somebody else to create that momentum for you. There is no sponsor in the world. There is no investor in the world who's going to carry the same momentum that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who receives funds and pays myself based on the stories that I tell and that I pitch to people, I have to be the biggest advocate in the room, even sometimes maybe more than the directors, because I'm responsible at the end of the day for the monetary side of it. And I'm also responsible for the creative side because they need to bring that in. And so that is tough to be Mr. Happy every morning. I'll tell you what it takes. It's like 2 or 3 Nespresso pods, a couple of push-ups. It's staying healthy, centered. It's being alert. It's being there for my children. It's finding what makes me happy. These are hard things. It sounds so easy to list this off as a laundry list. You should hear the conversations I have with my parents, the conversations I have with my friends. There's days where I'm really upset about stuff. There's days where I'm a baby about stuff. I'm whining and crying and being like, it's not going to work out. But that's okay. You can have those. There's days where I'm apologizing to everybody. You know, days where I fuck up a relationship. And I'm like, please take me back. We've all been there.
I think the thing that you hit on really well there was momentum. And I don't think enough people who have like regular jobs, I don't think they understand this idea of momentum for filmmakers and for independent producers who are going from project to project. Because if you don't have that momentum, if you're in the middle of shooting something that you've already raised money for, that's the best time to raise money for your next project, right? If you're in the field doing something, you're taking sat phone calls from Argentina being like, yeah, fucking hurry this up. I need to get my next project. Like, time becomes valuable when you have momentum and you're making the stuff you want to make. And that's the best time to be raising money.
Yeah.
And it's like starting a 100-meter race flat-footed. Like that's what independent producers, I think, now are feeling after COVID and after the strike. It's like, how do you get sprinting again from a standing flat-footed start? And I think that has been really the difficult thing, is to get that momentum back.
I think it is. And I think a lot of people make movies because they think movies come with something.
Yeah.
They don't come with anything. They come with nothing. So accept that's what it's about.
It's an empty glass. You got to fill it.
It is. But here's the thing. There's a philosophy about glasses that I really love. It's half full or half empty. I am the glass.
So you don't think it's half full or half empty?
I'm the glass.
You just exist?
I exist as the glass. Whether it's full or empty, like, I'm still going to be here.
Oh, that's a nice way to look at it.
I'm still going to be here.
It's kind of zen.
I don't think I made it up. But
I am not the glass half full or half empty, because that would lead you into an emotional debate of whether you think positively or negatively about things. So fuck that conversation.
No,
I am the glass.
I am the glass. I can be empty, I can be full. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can get to that point, I don't practice that every day. Like I said, I have bad days. But if I can remember that I'm just the glass, or there's this film, Dead Man. Do you remember that, with Johnny Depp?
I don't remember.
Jim Jarmusch, where he's in the forest. I told this to my mom because she has no film history. So I love telling her like things because I can just make up the plot. You know, I don't have to be 100% right. But if I remember this properly, Johnny Depp's in the woods, you know, long before he was known for an Amber Heard trial.
He had a career before that too, by the way.
Just amazing. Had he just no eye contact, just stoic. I mean, best performance of his life, honestly.
Absolutely.
Just unbelievable.
He took Captain Jack Black into the court.
Or just, I don't know what happened there, but it was pretty impressive.
I feel like Jerry Bruckheimer produced that whole thing.
It's incredible. It's incredible. But he's in this film and he's in the woods and he's sort of, I don't know what he's playing. It's often hard to determine what character or what it would have been in the script.
He plays himself.
But he's in this and he's sitting in a campfire and he's sitting across from a Native American. I don't know what tribe. And he asks him, the Native American goes, "Who are you?" And he goes, the native goes, "I am nobody." And so I like to take that philosophy now, that I am nobody. My attachments can go anywhere and the glass can be empty and full.
I think that's a great way for a producer to see themselves. Like, I am the glass. And then you have to put everything into the glass and then mix it up. And then I will give you a story. Like, in a lot of ways, that's what you're doing, right? Like, you have to put all of these pieces of the puzzle together in order to have this story to tell and to share, right? That's what happens when you're a storyteller. That's what happens when you make film. And I see that, like, you are the glass. Everything has to be put in.
It is. And I love, like, that being said, like, I love the directors that I get the opportunity to work with. Like, I really try hard to have a relationship with them. It's like, I want to handpick them. I want to be like, okay, I want to be friends with this person at the end of the day. I want to go on this journey. So it's not an egotistical place where I come from. I really fall in love with what they're trying to say in their stories.
And I'm sure they appreciate that.
I hope so. If they're listening, they should know that in case they didn't hear that in the last meeting. But I do. I really fall in love and I know how to pitch their material. I know how to pitch their material so well that I've fundraised for people in the past without ever turning in a script. And so that's when you really fall in love with someone's creative. And you really, you have to, when you're pitching, you have to sit there and be like, okay, am I representing the director? I hope I'm not pitching the wrong thing because I just got them money for this. And now they got to make this movie. So you have to be really in tune with what they want to do and then how you're going to market the movie. And I say this like my ventures are like, I'm not making Top Gun. I'm an independent producer. This is what I will live and die on. Even if I have the opportunity to make a bigger movie like that, I'll still come back to this. Like, people are going to be like, you're ridiculous. You had success doing this. Why would you come back? Because it's just so damn fun to me. Like, it just is. I love being close on a small crew. I love those personal relationships. I love that it's not an exchange of salary. It's an exchange of ideas.
Yeah.
And you live and die on those ideas.
I think independent, small productions are beautiful like that. And I think big productions, everyone gets carried away and you don't even know who you're working with. That's true.
Anything I've worked on that's bigger, I never remember. I try. I'll hide things. When I was a DP, I used to like put the cast list, you'd stick it to the side of the camera because you'd have like 10 actors. I know who this person is. I've seen them on a TV show, but I can't remember their name.
And do they want to be called their real name or do they want to be called their character name, right?
This is a good subject. I've always had a really good relationship with actors. I adore them because I feel, and I've dated, I had a really good relationship with an actress and we were very close. We had a great relationship. We still have a beautiful friendship. And I learned so much from her in terms of how much they put in front of everybody else and what risks they're taking to not look stupid. And that changed my perspective about actors. They're taking the biggest risk. They're the first ones we make fun of and say, oh, it was a bad performance, but the story's okay. Or we say the story is terrible, risk back. That actor was great. So it always comes back to them. And so I really respect that process in every way and trying to support it. Not because I feel like I don't like putting people and having them bask in their own glory. That's the tough, man. That is so tough.
Mm.
I mean, being an actor in film or theater, just live, you know, you could just hear people yawn. I mean,
you can feel the yawn.
Not everybody can do that. No, I mean, there's people in the studio right now behind this curtain have fallen asleep during this entire thing. I've had to listen to it the entire time. There's like 15 people back there. Line them up. 15
snoring away
today. Get behind some more espresso.
I can only do one of these every few days.
Yeah. I can imagine after this one, you're going to probably sleep for a week.
No, this has been great, actually. I mean, you've taken this in so many different directions. I really appreciate, like, you've come in really open.
Yeah, I'm not guarded.
Yeah.
I won't be guarded. I won't open up to a degree of just complete self-annihilation. That's next time I'm here.
Great. Well, we'll schedule that in for November.
Just we can get it in sooner, probably.
Around the holidays.
Meltdown.
I mean, you know, where do you see yourself going in the next 6 to 12 months as a single father, as a co-parenting husband, as a independent filmmaker? Like, you've got a lot of fucking really serious shit on your plate.
I do. And I think other people look at that and tell me that too. You know, people who have been in my life, they're like, you got to get your shit together.
But are you calm about it? Are you embracing the challenge?
Not always. I'm learning. Put it that way. I'm learning what the challenges are. I'm learning how to adapt and how to become stronger in this. And the only way to do that is just to practice it. If you back away from it and you pretend that it's not happening, I did that for a while. My divorce was complicated. I won't talk about it on the air.
Sure.
In respect to, because there's a mother out there who still has kids. And we have very different perspectives, but it's not an easy thing to go through. And ours was complicated because of international stuff and, you know, home and living life. And we didn't even get into this. Like, we built our house with our own two hands, like physically built it as our own contractors and workers.
Jesus.
And I lived in a tent for 2 years. We didn't even get into that. That's another time. But then I learned what hard work was, but then you also learn what dedication is. And when you're that dedicated, you sometimes become not so dedicated to yourself.
Interesting.
You're dedicated to a craft in which you're not meant to be in. And maybe you're living someone else's dream. And that was the big epiphany for me, was this is not necessarily my dream. You go through that in a relationship sometimes.
Yeah, you lose yourself sometimes.
You do. I say it again, put the asterisk on this. I'm a giver. And so you have to learn how much you're willing to give. And it's great to be a giver. That's great for anyone who wants to get in a relationship with me. You know you're going to get a lot from me. But now at this stage of my life, it's important for me to meet in the middle.
At the bare minimum.
At the bare minimum, you know? And that's not because I want to feel like I need to protect myself. So as a father, I need to be there for my kids, but I still need to meet them in the middle.
Yeah, you need some time to yourself too.
You need some time to yourself. In my career, it's 100%, unfortunately. Things don't get made. Can't just meet in the middle and hope for the best. You know, as soon as I leave you today, I'll get back on the phone. Got another investor. My investors are the best. They believe in me.
Yeah.
Don't have to sell them on stuff. I say, this is what I need. This is what I think is a good idea. And they trust.
That's amazing.
They trust. And because I think I offer them a sincerity, and also they see the financial rewards, whether it's losing money or it's a bigger gain. And so bouncing all these things, man, for some people it's overwhelming, but I constantly reinvesting back into my support mechanisms. And when I don't have support from a particular person, I'm like, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that we both need to breathe and come back to this later.
As an aside, I know you're going deep on your personal stuff there, but we'll just wipe that away for a second. Let's go back to this business bit. When you're producing and you're reaching out to your investors, you're offering them a financial return on what they're investing in. So you're making a feature film. You know, they invest X, they're going to get X plus Y back if it does this or if it does that. If it does it, I really love that business, because I feel like it's a way easier sell. And especially if you have a track record, like it seems that you do, it's kind of easy. I feel like it's an easier conversation to have. So one of the problems I'm having, as you're telling me about your personal life, I'm just going to jump into my problems. One of the problems I'm having is like I raise money for my exposure.
Yeah.
So the people who invest in me, they have to judge the quality of the return by the exposure that I give them on social media or through my actual television show. Because my TV shows, the way I make them and I produce them independently, they don't make money right away. Like it takes years for them to recoup, right?
Of course.
So, I have to be able to sell them on this idea that I have enough followers or I have enough interest or I have enough streaming hours to make it worth their while. And that can be fucking mind-numbing conversations. I love them because they listen and they take the time to assess and then they say yes or no. And I'm thankful for that time for them to assess and then make a judgment. But it is really a rougher conversation, I feel, than when you're just looking at investments and then return on investment.
Well, I have a different philosophy on that.
Hit me.
I mean, we all have cell phones, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just say we have an Apple phone. Like I've got a 14 or a 15. I don't know where I'm at on that. But if Apple just stopped making the phone at the first one and told their investors, we're going to make a lot of money off this phone for 10 years, that would be the same philosophy as telling your investors, we're going to do this one thing and then we're going to make money for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I look at filmmaking as an investment into, let's say, a storytelling lineage, that this director is going to do multiple films. This is not just an investment into one. This is about their destiny as a filmmaker, where they will go. I do not do a one and done. I try and say, we're going to do this one. We're going to make it successful. Let's see if we can make our money back. But really, we will start to make more money and the more times we make this investment in different directors and more projects for that director. And so we cannot look at it as a one-off. We cannot be rich and famous on a one-off. If that's what they want, that's great. It's not what I'm looking for, but maybe it's what everybody else is looking for. You have to build. People say, oh, you got to build the brand. You got to build the brand. There's truth to that. We need to know what we're returning for on a Friday night. Oh, it's this director and I love their last movie, or it's just quirky enough for me to watch it. And so I focus in on that quirkiness, that oddball, that one thing that's just a little bit different than everything else. And so when I hear you talk about, oh, how do we see what the future is going to be? Well, one, we'll never know what the future is, but we do know what the consistency is. If you are consistent, then your product is consistent and people can see that. So I refer to tech. We invest in tech because of its consistency. So we'll follow a product for its consistency. We also do the same thing with people and relationships. So if I'm not consistent with my partner, let's just take that, they're going to be like, whoa, this is really off brand. Like he's not delivering on what he is or she is delivering on. And so we have to do that as filmmakers too. It's okay to mix it up, but you've seen directors mix it up and everyone's like, whoa, that's not what I came for.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with reinventing, okay, and being like, oh, I'm doing this movie for fun. But we do need to be consistent in how we show up as storytellers. That's really, really important. And it's important to our investors and it's important to our philosophy as storytellers. And I think success comes with focus and craft. And so craft is not one movie. It's 10 movies over a lifetime. And if you can direct 10 movies as a director, wow, that's a really good career. You get to like 5 or 10. You've been lucky enough to make those movies. If you get 15 or 20, then great. That's wonderful. But not everybody's going to get there. Don't have those expectations.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you when you reach out to investors, are you trying to get their investment for a slate of movies, or are you just having them invest in one at a time, but preaching that consistency? Because for me, I'm reaching out to a lot of brands and a lot of corporations, and a lot of when I pitch to them is the most important thing because they're working on marketing cycles, right? And then it's very rare. And then of course, no brand wants to have too much exposure with you, right? Like they want to show that they've got other things going on. And I run into a lot of these conversations all the time.
I think I don't work with corporations, to answer your I don't, because corporations would not move fast enough.
It's true.
And they are not in the business of they're risk averse. So I'm very open about investment in film. I'm like, there's a chance you're going to lose your money, but we will gain here. And so I think you have to go into it, once again, the philosophy of just being honest and upfront and direct. And that's what gets you the emotional and financial investments. People want to see people be successful. It's in the bottom of their hearts. So people are meeting with you about a financial opportunity. You've already won the meeting. They're there talking to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
They're interested. They're already emotionally invested in you. So how do you walk out of the room? Like defeated when you don't get the money? Like, no, they already like you.
Mm-hmm.
So what they didn't like is your project or the way you presented it.
Yeah.
So when I present a project now I think about, well, how do I build this up? This one and done society we're in, this one-off. You know, I look at your podcast. It takes commitment. People want to see commitment. And so I expect the filmmakers that I work with to have that sort of the same level of commitment that I do. If I'm going to do this for 25, 30 years, then you better be doing it for 25, 30 years as well. Or maybe this just isn't right for you.
Yeah. But taking breaks or doing other things in the middle and then coming back, like that consistency makes people afraid to invest.
Emotionally, first. Let's talk about that. Don't worry about the money. The money will come if you're consistent. I really do believe that. People will find you and they will know. That's sort of where I feel my stronghold is at this point. It's my consistency to show up, get on the phone, be approachable, and help. I'm sure there's a number of directors who probably would say the opposite about me, maybe, but I think that's the learning curve over 20 years of being like, I didn't arrive at this yesterday. I arrived at this probably through COVID. What is that you want to do with your life? I want to make movies. How do you do that? Consistency, good relationships, clean out the closet of all the people who aren't serving you that well.
Mm-hmm.
Clear out all the bad memories and the negativity that are not serving you very well. Those things don't get you very far. They just get you frustrated and they make it hard to connect with the next person. That's a really hard part of it.
Yeah, because I think you bring that baggage with you into those next conversations and people can really smell it.
They do.
They smell the frustration or the anger or the, feeling ripped off or something like that. Negative energy definitely comes across and no one's going to invest in you or with you if you're carrying tons of negative baggage.
I don't think so. And I think the negativity, the anger, the anger where it's politically fire, that you're masking your lack of creativity with anger, political fodder, we live in a town of that. Whether it's left, right, center, upside down, or backwards, like everybody feels like they need to express their anger in some way and frustration. They should be investing into themselves, into their creative modus operandi, right? Like they need to know where they're starting it from. And I think just the creative journey is a long, evolving, arduous trail. And you have to just stay on it.
And believe.
And I don't think you have to believe. You just have to stay on it.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's true, right?
You don't have to believe any of it. Just stay on it. And if you're looking for answers, then just stay on it. Eventually it'll appear. You're either doing a really bad job and you need to just keep getting better at it. I look at filmmakers and I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen filmmakers who I just thought were awful. And they just kept at it. They just got better. And they made another awful thing. Got a little bit better. And it was like, oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's the trick. Some people are going to make it that way. Yeah. And some people are going to make it at the beginning and they're going to fall from grace. And I've seen that too. And that hurts. Some people die, they expire at a young age. Other people just disappear. You're like, where did that person go? They won all those awards and never heard from them again.
Yeah. That ability to grind.
I think so. I don't think that's, man, I try not to use that word.
Because it sounds too much like a gay
No,
dating app.
No, I like Grinder. No, I don't say it because it makes me feel like, yeah, it is a grind, but to me it's not. It's a place of passion.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds too, like, it's too frictional for me. Right? Like, it's like, oh, this is such a grind, you know? It's like the word, I use the word gigging too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get it. Gigging is a good word, but wouldn't it be better if you went out in the world and you said, I'm just passionate about what I do? I would look at you and be like, oh, that's really cool. I'd be more attracted to you as a person. If you said, you know, it's a grind or it's a gig, I'd be like, okay, now I know where you stand. Your immediate messaging to me is that it's just a job to you. And I know inside of me, it's not a grind. It's a place of passion. I don't want to think of it as that, because I look at what, like, my dad did. That was a grind,
mm-hmm.
right? Putting food on the table for 4 kids and trying to keep us under one roof. Like, that was a grind. He'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to look back and be like, well, that was a grind. I did this great sacrifice. I want my kids to look at me and say, wow, it was tough, but you're always very consistent about your passion for what you do.
How much is that important to you? Like, now that your kids are getting older, like, they're going to start having memories around this age, around 4, 5, 6, about their dad, right?
Yeah.
Like, how conscious are you of carrying your stresses or your difficulties at work around with them, and how aware are you of how aware they are of catching those feelings or energies? Because I had a really great chat with a friend of mine, Thomas, a little while ago, and he was really carrying around a lot of stress and negativity around his children.
Yeah.
And he went through like an experience where he was able to kind of recognize that, and he had to put a stop to it, like, right away, because he was really getting a sense that his children were feeling that he was carrying around all this negative energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think things always come in waves, right? Like, and so you have to, it's okay to have a bad day. And I think, you know, it's whether you admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You need to admit you're having a bad day when you're having one, and then just be like, I'm moving on tomorrow. Okay. But today's a bad day.
And do you give yourself the bad day and check out, or do you push yourself through it?
Like any human.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I just beat the hell out of myself. Sometimes I beat the hell out of the relationships around me. You know, I'm kicking and screaming, trying to keep it in. But I think if you're aware of that and you're trying to be thoughtful and moving past that, I think you get into trouble when you're not identifying what's happening, when you're just ignoring this sort of thing. And when it comes to children, let me think about this. I have a very different philosophy in terms of parenting than my ex. Okay? I like to sit down with my kids and I like to tell them what's going on in a parental way. Like, Daddy's having some big feelings right now. Okay? And it has nothing to do with you. Okay? And you're probably feeling that. Are you feeling that? And I'll ask my son and daughter, do you feel that? And they'll be like, kids will always say yes because they just want to be agreeable. But I can tell they are. They sit there and I can see them ponder that for a moment. And I'm like, okay, I'm making a connection. I'm respecting them as human beings. They're not just my children.
Mm-hmm.
They're humans. And this is their journey. Let me give them the opportunity to be expressive in this medium and this moment. Let them sit. They don't understand my words. Let them digest it the way that their little human brains are going to take it in. And I've had some really good people in my life. Really. I've had one person in particular that was a single mom who's been a dear friend of mine for 21 years. And she's really lent me a lot of perspective about what children see and how brilliant they are, and how there's certain times to mask certain things, but there's other opportunities to bring them in and create understanding and that you all grow. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like, this is my family. I'm a single dad with 2 kids. Doesn't matter if I wind up with somebody else, right? They're still my children.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they become someone else's children after a couple of years, but today they're mine, and there's only 3 of us. And there is a co-parent. Whether or not we get along or not will be decided. You know, maybe the courts will decide that further down the line, 10 years from now, and that gets rediscovered. But that's always part of my life now. That part's not changing. And so acceptance, I went through the denial. I'll be honest with you. I thought I could be Buddha and be like, I'll make everything right, and I'll just chill out, and I won't really adhere to any of the court orders, and I'll just try and be a nice guy. And it's like, oh, wow, that was a mistake.
Really?
Just putting your head in the sand. Yeah. And then I'm like, you need to be more assertive, not just for yourself, but for everybody else. Make a decision, live with the decision, and do it for what you believe is the ultimate kindness. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Like, I know I definitely did, but I can take this divorce philosophy and I can apply it to every other aspect of my life. And like I said before, there has been people who have helped me out. You know, this woman I was telling you about, extremely helpful in terms of me seeing things in a new light. My sister, extremely helpful. My parents, my other friends who work in the industry, who work long hours, helpful on interpersonal issues, helpful on set discussions. How do I approach this? What do I do? When should I be angry? When should I be upset? When should I be down the middle on this? Mm. Am I being taken advantage of? Am I not? Or am I just misconstruing this information? It's amazing what happens in your head if you allow it, but ultimately you have to find the simple answers. Mm. And I think as creative people, sometimes, oh my God, we create these huge dynamics in our head and we're like, time to come out.
We overthink it.
Yes. And we kill ourselves doing it sometimes. We really do. And I think that's important to me, is to not to do that, and to crush your own soul in the midst of it and laugh about it later. Be like, whoa, you were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or apologize for being ridiculous.
And grow from it.
Yeah, and then see what you can do for the other person if you wind up harming someone else, or even when you harm yourself, ask yourself, what can I do for you to move past these moments? This is the human thing. This is the story. I go out and make movies and tell stories. Then I have my own story too at the same time that I'm chasing. We talked about that earlier. And so how am I going to write that story? That's it. That's all I got for you today, Ryan. It's like 8 hours in. Exhausted. Fucking exhausted.
Well, that's maybe this is a good time to cut it off. I don't think I could. I mean, that was so eloquent. I don't think I could. I don't even know how to come back and ask you anything on what you've just said. That was beautiful.
You can't.
And I thought, I'm fucking amazing. And Well, I thought we were just going to come in and talk about making movies all day, but you fucking made a right turn early, and I'm so glad you did. This has been wonderful.
I don't think it's about making movies is just part of what the passion is. I could get into that, but you still have to be a person in this journey as well. That's so incredibly important that you know who you are, because it's so easy to get lost.
That's true.
You know?
And twisted and trying to fit into someone else's mold.
Well, you can't see the forest through the trees.
Absolutely. Look, buddy, wow. Thank you so much for coming in. We've done just about 3 hours. So now we're going to go to the wide, check out the production quality. And we're in the same room, no Zoom.
I look exhausted.
You look great.
I look so tired.
And we shake it out because we're in the same fucking room.
Oh, do people not realize that?
Sometimes no. And then
guys, let's get some color correction over here. This guy is really red.
I'm looking really white, actually. But then watch this production quality. This is the best we do. Ready? Fade to black.
Wow.
And we're out.